Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Edwards. I'm with the Ohio Department of Education. We are currently experiencing just a little bit of problems in the background. That's why we're a couple of minutes late. We're working through some issues. Wanted to make you aware of a couple of things. You're using the Q&A feature in the right-hand side for asking questions during the presentations. You will not be able to speak as a participant. There are over 200 people involved in this meeting so far, or at least have signed up for the event. One thing that we have found with the Q&A is that it does not auto scroll. So to keep up with the most current questions, you will need to scroll through the featured section. Now, if your question is selected to be answered, it will be published. Okay. This event is being recorded, and as far as I know, I think I've made the correct settings when I set up the event. I do not have any information now as where it will be hosted. And I will let you know through the registration where you can find that at. And it will be posted in multiple places probably before it's over. We have a mix of both public and private schools presenters for you today. You should have received the agenda for the event when you registered, which will begin here in about 2 minutes. We are looking at blended distance learning, security, and connectivity. You should see on your screen the agenda for today. My co-producer is Dave Stein. He will be moderating the Q&A along with the participants. Our blended and distance learning group is getting ready right now. Our security group will follow them at 10 o'clock. And then the connectivity group will run at 11. Okay. So with that, we'll see. And the presenter showed up here. Now I'm going to bring on Paul Hieronymus. Paul, please unmute your mic.
Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm fine. One thing I will share with all the presenters and also with the participants is that there is a 10 to 20 second built-in delay on the software Teams. So please be aware of that. And with that, I'm going to turn the blended and distance learning over to Paul until Eric shows up. And we're good to go.
Alrighty then, I'm going to go ahead and share our presentation then.
Okay.
And give me 1 second here.
Paul, we can't.
I might try that again.
Okay.
As soon as I went to share, I was kicked out of the conference. Let's see if that will play a little nicer now. Are you seeing my presentation?
Yep.
There it is.
Okay, excellent. All right. So apologize for my clunkiness with this today, but welcome to the virtual summit for our distance and blended learning piece. And I'm just going to quickly go through with our portion of this. Here are the attended presenters, but we're hoping that our third one will be able to make it. I'm going to go ahead and go to our next slide here and turn it over to Kim to talk about the Communication Hub portion of this presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kim Knighty. I'm Director of Technology at North Canton City Schools. I actually have, because we are all used to stringing things together to make them work, I have Eric on my cell phone on speaker. So we're going to see if he can participate that way as we roll through here. So so be patient with us. We're trying to make things work. The first thing that we wanted to talk about is communication. So that's one of the big things that we found in our district was that sometimes the parents felt very overwhelmed. They were getting emails from all different teachers. They were getting emails from the school, from the district. It was very overwhelming. So when we started to take a look at what went well, what didn't go well, one of the things we decided we needed to work on was how we were communicating with everyone. So I made this kind of graphic to show what we have been talking about, communicating from the district out to basically everyone. But how do we make that flow happen better? So we started to look at what tools do we have to use. We actually have Schoology as our LMS, so we use that quite a bit for communication purposes because obviously you can communicate from teacher to student, but you can also communicate from buildings out to the families. So our families are tied to the district and they're also tied to the building where their children attend, as well as the classes and any groups. So we decided that Schoology would be one of our main pieces for communication. We also have parent listservs, emails. We have Facebook presence for the district and for the buildings. So we thought, okay, we need to still use those, but we need to kind of differentiate between them, how we're using them, what we're posting and where we're posting it, and be more purposeful so that people are not overwhelmed with too much communication. Because some of the buildings were using different things like Class Dojo or Seesaw or different apps like that, which is fine typically, but it seemed like when we went remote, it was very confusing for families as to where do I find information. So the first thing that we're doing is selecting and streamlining our tools. We've declared these are the tools we're going to use to communicate within the district. Then we're going to educate our stakeholders. So we're going to let our teachers, our students, and our families, even the community know this is where you will find information. This is how you will get information. I think that education part is very important. If they understand where it's coming from, then they know, where to look for things. We've also, we're getting organized. So actually it was one of our teachers brought up on a call. We've been having weekly calls with our staff members, some of them who have volunteered, to kind of go over things and make plans. And a couple of them said, I think it would be better if in Schoology, when we are posting assignments, and we use Schoology, this could be any LMS or any system that you're choosing to use to kind of be the hub of your materials, if they're digital materials. We think we should make folders and have it kind of consistent throughout the district. So if your child is in kindergarten, or if your child is in 8th grade or 12th grade, as a parent, you know which folders to access for which information. So I think that was a great idea, and we are working on kind of what that looks like. It's not an effort to kind of put your thumb down and make everybody conform and be the same, but everyone does recognize that it would be a lot easier on families if we had that stuff organized. So families were struggling to help their students, and if there are extra things like where do I have to go find things, they're not getting to concentrate on the actual work with the students and making sure that they're getting things done. Some of them were you know, fairly upset about just struggling to learn the technology and find things. So some of the things that were being communicated, you know, lesson plans, learning resources, when we were having meetings, you know, making sure they're not overlapping, technology instructions, workflow instructions, late work reminders. We had some students who were, you know, falling behind, and they'd open up their email and have 30 emails from their group of teachers, get overwhelmed and just kind of close the laptop lid. So that's something that we are looking to streamline. So we have decided to be very systematic about it, about our communication, and then make sure that everyone understands. So eventually I'm going to take this and I'm going to add in what, you know, what exact platforms we're using, what folder structures look like, and we'll educate all of our stakeholders as to where to find things. So that is what I was going to cover in the communication hub piece. I think, is Eric up next?
I am.
Okay, all right, so we're going to see if this works. Maybe we can get some feedback, thumbs up from our other presenters as to if this is working. Go ahead, Eric.
Hello, my name is Eric Trish, and I'm the Executive Director at the Fairborn Digital Academy. I apologize for my technical difficulties. Hopefully we can get this resolved. So when talking about communication, there's you know, two options. We have the asynchronous communication and the synchronous communication. So I'm going to talk a little bit about asynchronous. When we talk about asynchronous, there's different ways that we can go about putting stuff out there. Within a system like Kim discussed with Schoology, that is out there as a one of the more canned methods of communicating. Within that, you have email options, you have discussion boards, you have things where the student can leave you a message and you can reply to it when you get around to it. There's more of the synchronous method that will be discussed in a moment. And then we look at, you know, teachers going out and creating more content for themselves to post to whatever LMS is being used. One of the things that we really need to think about when we start looking at all of these communication pieces is connectivity. What connectivity do the teachers have, especially if they're working from home, and also what connectivity is available to the students as they are working remotely. So if you're creating a large 30-minute video, how are the students going to be able to access that, especially in our more remote rural areas where they might not have great connectivity? So creating a large video might not necessarily be the best idea for communication. we have found within our school that we really need to communicate and communicate well, because that's the big point. As students were starting to work from home and realizing that, you know, they kind of felt lost. So we had to reach out to them multiple times, multiple ways. Phone is another option. Texting is another option. You also need to remember your record retention, because as I understand it, texts are a permanent record retention. You can never get rid of a text conversation. So somehow, if a teacher does do a text, they have to retain that forever. So having them do those on their personal phones becomes an issue. If there's ever any question about something and it has to be confiscated, then they're out of phone. So we really need to look at different ways that we can communicate to our families through things like Google Classroom or a Meet call, things like that. But having the ability to do it not synchronous is probably one of the biggest keys. So, you know, we'll turn that over to the synchronous piece now so that we can discuss that option.
Thank you very much, Eric. And so I'm going to be taking over the synchronous piece. I'm Paul Hieronymus. I'm the Director of Technology for the North Ridgeville City Schools and the Vice President of the Ohio Distance Learning Association. On your screen, we're just showing, as many of you know, the major players of synchronous technology, where we're looking at, as Eric was sharing in our asynchronous group, where that's a piece that can be done at your own pace or can be done at different times. In our synchronous environment, this is a live video conference where we're expecting it all to be done in real time. With my district, we did a lot of surveying of our parents, and during the spring, we tended to be a little heavier on the asynchronous end and a little lighter on the synchronous side. And when we did our polls from our parents, one part was we found out that, about 87% of them were pretty happy with how we were doing things, in that, for the efforts that we had to go through. But there were two glaring things that came out. One just supported what Kim was saying earlier about having that hub, having that one place for all your content. But then we also had a large statement of parents saying they wanted our instruction to be teacher-led. They wanted it to be more of a simulation to what is taking place in the class, if they were in place in the classroom, which also tends to feed pretty well with our classroom teachers who are new into distance learning, because this is probably the tool that is closest to what they would be doing on a normal basis. So over the summer, we then did another set of polling of our community, and we really asked the question of how comfortable are you with coming back to school? And we found a large population of parents who said that they were very concerned about their kids coming back to school. And then, to probably no surprise to all of you, we had two camps: the I'm not wearing a mask camp and the I'm not sending my kid if they're not wearing a mask camp. So as we started to look at our numbers, we realized that we have a growing population of people who are probably not going to be coming to school if with the options that are going to be released, which we feel is going to, after Thursday's presentation from the governor, we think that'll move forward. So we knew we had to have an online curriculum. With that online curriculum, we decided that we were going to follow the communications from our parents. We decided we were going to be synchronous. We want this to be teacher instructed, teacher led. And so we opened up our registrations for that, and we actually have our cutoff date for July 17th so we can get our scheduling in. We polled our teachers. Quite a few teachers were interested in doing the synchronous piece. We polled our families to see, again, how many of them were interested by even registering and signing up. And before we even did our parent information and webinars, we already had 150 students registering before they even knew what the program looked like or was going to be, how it's going to be delivered. From those parent webinars that we have been using, we have over 200 now families who have registered, and that registration is growing daily. We anticipate, though, that once we announce our final plans, those numbers are going to explode into the 500s, and being able to have those students going online. We are focusing on, for our Synchronous tool, is Zoom. That is the tool that we chose to do. We were heavy Zoom prior to COVID, so for us that was the one that made the most amount of sense. For us, it's powerful because of the breakout rooms, the ability for it to be synchronized with Google for our single sign-in, the lack of students having to have an app to be able to run with it. We went with Zoom Pro through the Management Council so that we can be able to record, because our teachers were using Chromebooks. So all of those pieces came into play to work with us. So now we're looking at being a little more heavy on the synchronous side, but we still will have that asynchronous part to the instruction as well, so that our kids are not just sitting there, just being part of lectures. We want that to be interactive. We want them to be using other tools as well. Sessions will be recorded and they'll be dumped into. We're using Google Classroom as our communication hub, and we will be able to pull all those recordings in for students to be able to watch after the fact. It won't be a lieu of participation, but it will be an option for students who may be having technical issues, students who are ill and being able to see content, or more importantly, students and parents who want to watch the directions and the instructions get delivered to them. So that's just a very quick piece of our portion. But again, Zoom is the one we're using. Microsoft Teams, as we know, is what we're on today. Cisco WebEx does have a presence, and then Google Meet is another very popular one with ours. And I believe, Kim, your group is a Google Meet site. If you want to throw in any quick comments about Google Meet.
Yes, we did use Google Meet quite a bit. The teachers liked it. Of course, at the beginning, we had those few problems that that Google fixed for us, like the meeting being able to continue on even if when the teacher left, and some things like that. So, and I see that they're even bringing out some additional tools that'll help us. We actually also used, because we have Schoology embedded in Schoology is conferences, which is Big Blue Button. So we kind of had those different tools to use, and it worked well so far. We plan to continue with those.
So as we're looking at these different communications tools, I think the key is, for the student end, it's really good. They're going to be a click to meet type of environment where they're going to get receiving links and being able to click them. But for the teachers end, that's where the focus needs to be placed as to which platform works best for you. As well as your policies and obviously you as the tech coordinators. So it really comes down to those features. But I think what we're going to see is those all starting to come more and more together. Teams will have a lot more improvements going up, because heaven forbid Microsoft updates always happen. And we're also hearing a lot of the features that Zoom has coming to Meet as well. So that's just the synchronous portion of the presentation. So I'll take this over to our Q&A portion, which I'm not sure how we manage that, Mike.
Are there any questions Dave, have you seen any questions about the presentation?
Not yet, Mike.
Okay. All right.
Okay, well then with that, then we'll turn it over to the other part of our group then, and that is the engagement group. And if that group would just kind of help me out with just when to advance the slides, I'll be happy to do it for you, unless we want to have one of you take it over.
Okay, that would be back to me. If you will be patient with me, I'm going to get Eric back on as yes. Okay. I'm sorry. Again, we are stringing things together a little bit here, so I think we all understand that. So I am calling Eric again and going to let him continue. Maybe.
Okay. While we're waiting, Barb had a question. Are you expecting to use in-person classroom and virtual teaching?
I'll answer that one. For my district, yes, we are planning on doing that on a scheduled synchronous environment where the students will be on a set time connecting each day.
Okay, I have Eric with us, so he can take us through the student engagement slide.
Okay, so as we discussed earlier during the communication piece, student engagement is really, really important, and we need to figure out how we're going to train students on the first day when they walk into the building, or if they can't walk into the building, I guess, really more effectively. So we have brand new students who didn't do remote learning with us last year, or we switched things up with remote learning for this year, and how do we do that training? And so one of the ideas that I looked at was doing some sort of a training video that is posted to the school website that teaches students step by step how to log into an account, how to access a folder, how to do all of the important pieces that are necessary to engage within the curriculum, be it through Google Classroom or Schoology or some other LMS. Again, as I spoke about before, we do need to think about the bandwidth available to our students and our staff as we do this. So that is definitely a piece to consider, but having many asynchronous options available for students, especially as we look at the older students, they like to work at 2 o'clock in the morning, and a lot of our staff don't. So how do we make sure that we can still engage with our students around their schedule? They may be the only ones working in the household, so they're working a traditional 9 to 5 job or maybe a second shift job and coming home and doing their work, making sure that we have that piece, but we can still engage them, work with them, encourage them to make sure that they do everything that they're supposed to do. One way to do that is through the teachbetter.com method of the grid method. It creates a calendar-like situation where students can kind of check off some things as they work through, or maybe using Keep as a way of creating a checklist that is in their face, that they can see, here are the things that I still need to get done, here are the things that need to make sure are happening in order to complete all the assignments that are necessary. But it has been my experience in working with remote learning for almost 20 years that if you don't engage the student immediately, it's within the first 24 hours of school starting, you start losing students. So you need to make sure that everything is ready on that first day that they have to log in. Make sure that the teachers know how to engage and meet with students, maybe through a Google Meet call, to communicate with their classes immediately. And then it is really important to make sure that your families are engaged. And so I will hand it off to Kim for family engagement.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, so family engagement again was another big piece for us, and I'm going to be honest with you that I kind of missed on that. You know, I was so busy trying to get our staff ready, and we were lucky. We had already been doing quite a bit of digital work, and our students had devices, but it was still a little bit crazy trying to get everybody up and running. So I kind of didn't get as much out to the parents as I should have. So that is, again, something I'm going back and working on this summer. So I'm actually creating, and I know a lot of people have something like this already, but I'm creating a parent academy. And, you know, again, we use Schoology, so that's what we're using to create it. But I've seen people put this on their website and, you know, different ways of communicating. So I'm sorry, my level of distraction. I'm monitoring phone calls. So I apologize. I'm trying to get everybody else in here to present. Anyway, the parent engagement piece is critically important. So I'm going to create information for them. I know we already sent out information to our parents about what do you do if the Chromebook breaks? You know, here's some things that we want you to try at home first before you bring it in, because at the very beginning, you know, it was critical not to have people in the buildings as much as we could. So we already kind of have that information out, some troubleshooting guides, but then, you know, just even the operation of the Chromebook, some of the parents, it's a foreign, you know, object to them. So we're thinking about doing some videos that literally show, you know, the pieces, parts of it, how to do different things that we sent out physical instructions for. And then moving into Google. A lot of people, you know, don't really know or understand how everything within Google works. Google Drive, you know, they don't understand, they're not comfortable inside of a Google Drive environment. So we're going to get some information to the parents specifically around that. Also in Schoology, some of our parents are pros at it, some are just starting out. Some are engaged themselves, being a part of groups as a parent. And again, some of them had not even created an account yet. So we're going to put in some different information about that. And then other things like the things we've been talking about here. You know, what is the difference between synchronous and asynchronous, and kind of explaining some of the apps that we use, talking about the curriculum vendors that we work with. You know, most of the curriculum vendors have an online presence, and so they need to know how to log in, you know, to these different sites sometimes. So we're literally going to take, I have a picture up here, it's kind of not the whole picture, but I created a picture of what our learning framework looks like with Schoology and Google, the main pieces, the hub in the middle, and then all the different tools that we use around the edges to support learning and assessment. So this is what I am working on to get our parents the information that they need to feel more comfortable if and when we do end up back on remote learning. So what I am not sure about right now is if Christine was able to join. And if not, okay, I'm going to quickly.
While
Christine.
we're waiting on Christine, we had a question. What were the two calendar checklist items? Teachbetter.com and
Mike, we were getting an echo from you. I don't know if anyone was able to really understand what the question was.
I can repeat the question. It was, what were the two calendar checklist ideas? Teachbetter.com and there was another one.
Okay, I think that was Eric who was sharing that information. I think that was from the engagement piece of the student. Eric, are you still with us?
He is not. Can you repeat that question again, please? I might be able to answer that.
Yeah,
I have Christine with us.
Okay, it was the two calendar checklist ideas, teachbetter.com, and there was another one.
Oh, I did hear him say that.
And it's published in the Q&A, so it's out there.
Okay. Oh, I'm trying to remember. I will try to remember and bounce back in later after Christine goes, or maybe if Eric is listening, he can text me and tell me. Okay, I have Christine up on speaker, so I'm going to let her go ahead with her slide.
Okay.
Great. Good morning, everyone. As we talk about engagement with the staff, we as tech departments can answer the call by being available for the supported platforms that faculty and staff will be using. As you can see on the slide in front of you, there are several opportunities for utilization with the resources that are out there for faculty to use in a new environments such as blended learning or virtually. One things we'll want to pay attention to is availability to support them and reaching out to them and letting them know that there are opportunities to work with them in preparation for this. In fact, if we take a look back prior to the situation in Ohio with COVID-19, we realized that utilization of tools and resources were there. It was just were they at the forefront of use by faculty and staff as we went into distance learning. When we look at technical resources for them, we'll want to pay attention to what is peer-to-peer. How can we assist counselors' interactions with students and engaging not only them, but us with the faculty, and the resources that we'll have for tools of the trade for a successful engagement. When we look at expectations and how we can enrich the environment for staff as they go into a blended learning and online learning situation, it's important for us to know what their expectations are to make it successful. One of the things that St. John's Jesuit found that when we went to our online distance learning is that
Hey, Christine, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second and ask if you could speak just a little bit louder. I think I'm afraid it's not coming through as clearly as it could.
Okay, I'm shouting at some level, but I'll certainly give it that all 10. Thank you, Kim. So one of the things that St. John's Jesuit experienced with staff and faculty engagement is that when we went to our distance learning immediately, we found that tech support was on the front end of being really proactive and reaching out to all 54 teachers. And then the teachers found that they were willing to go that extra mile and learn that our engagement was full circle. So it was from technology to faculty and staff to the student to the family. And as you heard from Kim and Eric this morning, it's really that cohesiveness that when we bring tech into the picture and have the understanding of what the families are doing, what the students are accomplishing, then we can provide that underlying support and provide to our faculty and staff that full tools that they'll be using, those fully tools of working through their platform, giving them resources for it, and then creating hubs and one-on-one and group sessions that will allow for them to feel confident when they're, again, in that blended learning environment. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Christine. I'll keep you on for a second in case there are questions. And I do want to say that I did remember Eric said Google Keep. So he was talking about using Google Keep as a way of, I think, taking notes and whatnot for student engagement.
Thanks, Kim. We put that out on the Q&A as well.
So I guess we come down to, is there any more questions on that particular portion of our presentation?
We do have questions from the beginning, but we can wait till the end if you want to field those. There's nothing from the current segment.
Kim, do we have our next presenters?
I think so. Can you hear me, Paul?
I sure can.
Oh, great. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Rich Smith and I'm with Lake Catholic High School. The people who are co-presenting with me on instructor support is Dr. Mary Engelhardt and Christine Richmond, who we just heard from. And we're going to take you through some things to consider as you think about supporting the instruction within your classroom. Go ahead to the next slide. Yeah, so the first thing you want to do is make sure you have a nice defined policy that's specific to the technology and accessibility, and designate someone in your building for that continuous improvement. So if you can get a team of tech people, that's great, but you want to double check your usage agreements and designate regular maintenance tasks to include software and hardware updates, in addition to ensuring a customer mindset. And who are our customers here, as we talk about here, instructors and teachers, as well as encouraging parental involvement as well. So from a partnership and curriculum instruction standpoint, you want to form a team with those who are responsible for CNI in your building so that you can work on ensuring a consistent level of service platform and understanding and communicating with staff as well. And you want to pay attention to updates from software platforms. I have a graphic here from Google Meet because it's going to be going through a major overhaul. There's a lot of different software companies that are doing that. So you want to make sure that you dedicate some time to staying up on the emails and the alerts and some of the notifications that are coming out, talking about how they're going to increase remote learning support through their software platform. And then that ties into maintaining an assistive technology inventory as well. And figuring out a way to create a system whereby devices can be checked out in the event of another remote learning situation. So prepare the fleet to cover your students and staff needs and create a plan for remote tech assistance. One of the things we did was a drive-through drop-off where we had baggies and gloves and disinfectant wipes ready to go in case there was a swap and the device swap because something wasn't working for students, and how to set up times for that. It was just one idea that we did. An online ticket system for students, establishing an online voice call system so people can call in issues that they might be having as they're using their devices. You also want to make sure that you're checking connections and data loads to ensure sustainability of streaming for remote purposes. And this can be inside the building, of course, when we're talking about if the teachers are going to be asked to come in, making sure that if you're going to promote a streaming situation for your teachers, that the connection loads can handle that. And then to communicate technology updates to staff consistently. So you might want to create a portal or a one-stop shop site communication with your staff, or help page for students and a communication portal for parents to lessen frustrations and increase communication efforts and promote engagement for students. And I think our next person up is Christine. Are you still with us, Christine?
I am here. Hello, everyone.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So when we talk about curriculum and interaction that we can have with the curriculum for staff, there are some things that are great tools that we can utilize. For that, Jim, are you there?
Yes. Yes, hello?
Jim?
She can hear you.
I can't hear anyone else. All right, I'll try again. So technology's role for the educator and curriculum, if we look at how we're going to focus the student-centered instruction, technology actually becomes that gateway to connect the instructor to the student in and out of the classroom. And connecting with curriculum, teachers are experts in knowledge of what they're teaching. It's how they're going to teach that. So things that we support from a technology standpoint would be the instructor with the LMS that they're utilizing. Is it Google Classroom that's supporting their LMS along with Microsoft Office 365? The device management, the tools that they're going to use to deliver the instruction to them. So what we found is if you look at the instructor tools and student tools, it's good to plan, prepare, promote, produce, and then rinse and repeat, right? Plan the tools that they're going to need for the delivery of that curriculum. What is it they're going to be doing? What can we enhance with the delivery of that instruction, with their pedagogy? Prepare the teachers as well as we can with those resources, promote professional development and resources that they can utilize to, again, prepare that, produce for them if they're uncomfortable and using a certain type of technology. Perhaps you can be a support to them, supplemental to them, and also teach them, and then rinse, go back to the beginning and reinforce it again, and then repeat your successes, bringing again that digital content and assessment tools to the teacher's fingertips, so that the curriculum not only is being delivered by the technology in the blended environment, but that the opportunity for teachers to collaborate collectively and also have that student experience with the curriculum be a positive one. Some examples that may be helpful when we look at curriculum as far as what it could be from a technology standpoint is that, training and support of the faculty and staff for teaching and learning. promoting that discussion for our learner-centered teaching experience, facilitating that educational technologies, and then providing that individual consultation to them as they design, produce, and get that digital learning backpack together. So if we're able to provide that data pack to the teachers, then their utilization will go just be higher and higher. Some other exciting things that we could look at is also just the technical requirements and making sure that when the teachers are planning their curriculum, they're able to use the best resources available in that blended and remote environment to deliver.
Okay. Thank you, Christine.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. All right. Awesome.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. It took me a minute to get in here, but my name is Mary Engelhardt. I'm the Director of Technology at the Medina County Career Center. And I'm going to cover virtual assistance portion and helping our instructors be successful. As many of you know, it's critical to maintain teacher communication and support, whether on or off campus. And we found through effectively assisting the instructors with various support systems, to do this successfully, you have to plan and place into practice before the school year begins. So here are the 7 areas which we found to be most effective with assisting our instructors virtually. Schedule optional weekly online help sessions to provide assistance and information sharing. What's great about this too is you can actually model the use of the district's approved video conferencing tool, be it Zoom, Google Meet, and so on. Develop a virtual space for teachers to collaborate, share resources, and assist one another. What we did is I had created a Google Classroom. I knew a lot of teachers were using Google Classroom and they felt comfortable. So that was their virtual space in which I provided them resources based on their content areas, gave them resources to how to, and also provided them a place so they can communicate and support one another. Create a distance learning hub for students, faculty, parents to include pertinent information such as internet access. Where can you go? Or is there any public internet areas to go to? Staff directories and links to the learning management systems. As the webmaster, I created a webpage specifically for this. So there was a one-stop shop, which then linked accordingly. Maintain a help desk system with extended hours for virtual assistance. In our case, web-based, which is the best, rather than just via email. We did extend our hours because with blended and or remote learning, our teachers found that they were working harder and didn't have the set schedule to work within, they didn't have that set schedule that they typically had traditionally. So they were working really much like 10 and 12-hour days. It was also helpful to provide examples of instruction, independent practice, communication with students and parents, and I placed those in that virtual space that I mentioned previously. Develop a list of trusted resources to use for remote, blended, and distance learning. As you probably know, we were inundated with emails from all of these vendors indicating, hey, use our product, it's free, which is great, which is wonderful, I'm not dissing that. But the problem is that a lot of teachers were a little bit overwhelmed on which tools to use. I was concerned about whether or not it met SEPA or FERPA requirements. So now that we have a month left, make sure that you are developing a list of trusted and supported resources for your staff, faculty, and students. And then finally, create a space for parents and guardians on how to, the information, resources, a parental academy, staff directories, so they also have an easy method in which to communicate. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. I had listed a few resources that I found extremely helpful, and I've actually passed them on to our staff and faculty. A couple under professional development. These are courses in art, which are free and that you may want to forward to your teachers, curriculum directors, support intervention specialists, and so on. Also, I included remote learning resources from the state of Ohio and also from Quality Matters. Good. Next. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, we have a question from Barb. Did you schedule help desk supporters to divide up the longer hours of availability?
Absolutely. Yes, they were in shifts. At the beginning, it was remote work mostly when this first came out. And so I have 4 techs at the time, and we split our time up. Well, I split their time up. I was just working around the clock, but I just wanted to make sure I was able to be able to support the teachers as needed. But yes, I did split them up.
Thank you. That's
Sure.
all at the moment.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. All right, I'll introduce this section, and then I believe we're going to start with Paul. It'll be myself again, Paul, and Dr. Richard Smith will be also presenting this piece. Go ahead. All right,
Thank you
Paul.
very much. So as we're talking about social distancing and the setup of our classrooms, that leads us to many challenges. I know that many of you were in similar situations to we are, where I have a high school that was overpopulated prior to COVID happening, and as we're hearing about social distancing parameters being suggested and how we're going to make that work, we jumped on this pretty early. We do have 2 of our buildings that are really set up well for this, that we're going to be using very heavily as we move forward, because we do have spaces where we have large common area, like we're showing in my first picture here, where we're able to, our setup in our academic center provides us with a studio, and then we have some classrooms with walls that could be pulled, it could be taken down, so we can combine multiple, combine 2 classrooms into one. So as we're looking at this setup here, we have our social distancing in place with our desks. Those are all within the 6-foot diameter with, distance between each other. But then we also are looking at being able to, having to move actually where our teacher computer would be to be able to use this space more efficiently with that group. So we're looking at, being able to provide that area. As we're looking at our plans, these combining of rooms is great, but that only allows us to then take 2 classrooms and make them be able to use one space. So we are looking at the A-B kind of a format. So one of the options that we are still considering is that we have an A teacher and a B teacher. A teacher would be on site using this common area Monday and Tuesday, but then be online Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Classroom teacher B would start the week Monday through Wednesday online. Then they would come in and have the common area space to work with Thursday and Friday. We're keeping Wednesday as a virtual day for a couple of reasons. One, because we need to try to find a way of getting intense cleaning in those spaces. But also, as we're looking at other options for some of our schools, we may need to find a place for a school that is not able to be in this format to be able to come in and be able to use a facility for that. Zoom is going to be is still going to be a critical piece for my district, and for you, it's whatever your Synchronous tool would be if you're following a model like ours. And one of the things that's important for us is as we take these spaces and we move students further and further away, we come into challenges of them being able to see the board. And so a question, a function that we do have is that our teachers can still do Zoom in a on-site environment. And the students, by muting their microphones and turning off their speakers, would be able to see the content being delivered from the classroom teacher through the content share functionality. Now, as we start to look at these different scenarios and different groups, there are going to be some groups that are going to be really in a challenge. while we do have a lot of students who are enrolling, enough that we can actually have a teacher per grade level, that becomes a challenge when we start talking about our high-tech academy or our STEM school or our high school, which are going to have some classes that are not going to have enough students to be able to provide that. And you're going to have to excuse the terminology here. We really need to work on this name, but we're looking at the ability of doing a simultaneous synchronized instruction. Like I said, we got to find a better name for that. But what we're talking about there is a scenario where some students are on site, some students are remote, and the teacher is instructing to both at the same time in a synchronous or a live environment. With that brings out this whole new set of challenges. How do you record that? How do you make your camera available so that the students from at home can see what's going on? How can we make it so students on site can still see what's going on? So it will be a combination of a shared screen that would be running between our teacher computer and the projector in the room, but then also using the screen share functionality and that digital whiteboard space of Zoom, which I believe Google Meet is going to have very shortly, and I'm sure that Teams will have something eventually. But we'll have those functions where the teacher is able to be able to share their content. What we're doing with that to make this a little bit easier is we're actually looking at an all-in-one computer that we're putting up in those few classrooms that will be in that scenario, so that our teachers then have the touch screen right in front of them. So we're not having them go into the board and trying to work there so that we have issues with audio. If we are using this all-in-one and doing all of our annotation in that one space, now the camera is able to pick up the teacher. The audio is going to be able to pick up the teacher as well. The microphones are going to be able to pick that up very well, and it's allowing us for the students on site to easily be able to hear the students who are away. Where we are at our downfall, or where our loss is going to be, is having students at home hearing a question or a comment that a student in the classroom has made. And in that case, we're either going to have the student walk up, or we're going to have the teacher restate what that student is saying. So as we're looking at all of our losses, we're saying, well, that's probably not too bad. So those are the configurations that we have. But again, as we start to take these rooms, take down the wall between the two classrooms, you're almost creating like a bowling alley effect for that classroom. So those students in the way back are probably also going to be relying upon Zoom to see the content that is being shared for the students in the room. So that's just a way of being able to set up the on-site with even a combination of the synchronous learning in place for that.
Can I interrupt just for a moment? We're getting some questions specifically about Zoom and the classroom setups. Here we have one. It says, if you are considering having all of the students in the same room connecting to Zoom to be able to see the board, have you run the bandwidth requirements needed to support that?
Yeah, we're pretty lucky. We have a very robust network for us to be able to support that, and we have done some simulations that we feel will be okay in that scenario.
Okay.
David?
Sorry.
Just want to say that we will be talking about that in the connectivity section of today's webinar as well.
Great. And then what would your recommendation be for a small charter school with a lack of available space?
You know, and that's where we get into that, that simultaneous synchronized instruction piece. You're gonna, your space really does dictate how you're going to be delivering your instruction more so than anything else. So you find out how many students you can get in with your social distancing, and then rotating students back and forth would be my suggestion on that piece.
Okay, and there was one last one here from earlier. How are you handling Zoom licensing? It says Zoom very strategically played the foot in the door marketing game.
So we purchased our Zoom through our ITC, through the Management Council, and we purchased pro licenses for our teachers to use. Our students are using the free version to be able to connect. So I think that answers that question.
Great, thanks a lot, Paul.
Now I'll turn it over to our blended learning piece.
Hi, everyone. This is Mary again. I'm I'm going to focus on the blended learning, and then we will move on to distance learning. But with blended learning, it's been found to improve the learning effectiveness through the application of differentiation and preparing students for collaborative workplace, especially in these times. But teaching in a blended learning environment creates challenges, or can create challenges for our teachers. So they must learn how to facilitate online discussions, small group activities, manage time, and provide students with the feedback they need to encourage active learning and engagement. And I think a lot of us districts across the state have found that engagement was the most difficult to support and to encourage with parents and students. A study I completed in 2017 resulted in creating the blended learning dimensions that you see on the right. Dimension 1, you want to, and this is the best way to, I found through my study again, to best support our teachers and our students. Within Dimension 1, you want to confirm that you have adequate network accessibility, which again will be covered later. You want to acquire appropriate and acceptable devices and peripherals. Evaluate the classroom design for collaborative activities, which is going to be rather difficult with our new rules in place. However, with the blended learning opportunity that is provided in this current environment, you can create collaborative areas online. You want to be sure to uphold federal, state, and local laws and regulations. Maybe this is a good time to review and revise your acceptable use policy. You want to maintain a review committee to assess, recommend, and improve instructional technology resources. You'll get, and I know you've gotten a lot of suggestions from staff and faculty saying this is a great tool, we should use this, make this accessible in our G Suite and whatnot. By having a committee and a rubric in which to use, we found very helpful. Under Dimension 2, you want to utilize the expertise of a curriculum coordinator or specialist. They can help with the technology integration. Also, a learning management system administrator. And it's not only to make sure that it's working properly and that all students can access it, but also help them with the integration of technology to help the students and teachers become successful. Under Dimension 3, I highly recommend to review your current licensing and electronic subscriptions, research adopted textbooks, and identify book companion sites. There's a lot of textbooks that are out there that have companion sites at no additional cost. It may include some activities, flashcards. It may not have the PowerPoint presentations or the assessments, but the book companion sites may have electronic editions. Also, I'm a big advocate of open source. Perhaps find some open source equivalents during this time. At the Medina Career Center, we encourage our teachers to recommend and evaluate web-based applications and resources. And that's what I mentioned before about having a committee to review and assess. Dimension 4, appoint an integrated tech specialist if you have one. Most of us do that double duty. Assemble a team of instructional mentors and coaches. Maybe in each one of your departments, you have someone who is the change agent, who's very confident, or at your schools, very confident in their areas. See if they're willing. Most people are really, most teachers and staff are willing and to help one another and to model. So that's where it becomes difficult, I know, for a lot of districts to provide adequate technology support. Some schools are utilizing students as an extension of their technology support. Dimension 5, you want to instill a culture of collaborative leadership by developing and maintaining open communication with our teachers. It was a very difficult time in the spring. Our administration did an outstanding job as far as communicating what they knew. They had held weekly, sometimes twice a week meetings with the teachers to let them know what they found out, what they knew, because we were all learning this together. Review and respond to the teachers' recommendations, observations, feedback. I'm sure many of your districts or schools have created a survey, as we did, getting some feedback, what worked, what didn't work, what can we do better, what do you need to know, how can we help you get ready for this fall with the unknown approaching. Dimension 6, provide the technology-specific training. Exercise a gradual, scaffolded rollout of the blended, so that they are not overwhelmed. Provide small group professional learning or professional learning community, or a PLC. We're doing that over the year, school year, to let teachers pretty much ran by teachers, explaining what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them. So that's an opportunity for our teachers to get that support year long. Engage teachers with relevant topics, so increase their knowledge and stay on top, but not overwhelm. And give the teachers flexibility in time and delivery to participate in professional development, just like our students. Flexibility is key. So if you are holding live PD, then please have it recorded and allow teachers to view it later, or actually participate remotely. And then finally, dimension 7, ourselves. And I know all of us we're trying to keep up on what's happening. It's very difficult. I'm very confident with Zoom and Google Meets, but Teams was challenging. I just didn't use it. So, it's difficult to support everything and know everything. But when your district or school adopts something, then be very good at it. Do your best, utilize your resources, and, don't be afraid to play. Next slide, please. This is Cincinnati School District. This was published on June 22nd. As you know, and as your own school knows, all schools across the state, the nation, they're analyzing their data, and it's based on their district needs and resources. Yes, the state, our governor had put out his guidelines, mandates, recommendations, but a lot of people are saying it was very vague. That can go both ways. I personally believe by allowing that little bit of vagueness, allowing each school district to determine what was best for their community and what their building or district could support. Cincinnati had chose that they had considered 3 different options with their blended learning. And after considering it, they determined to having students on campus 2 days per week on alternating weeks was the best variation in their goal to maximize in-person teacher-led instruction. And one last item, if your district is even considering continuing or adopting blended learning this fall, the Ohio Department of Ed requires that the blended learning declaration form be completed by November 1st. Even if your district doesn't do it, please notify whoever you need to that if they're even considering it, or if you want that as an option because of the unknown, please have them complete that declaration form. I provided a link to the form under additional resources, which is at the end of this presentation. Okay.
All right. Thank you. So simultaneous learning, as Paul mentioned earlier, is one of the strategies that we're recommending. And there is a term that's called hybrid flex or high flex. Paul, just so you know, you can use high flex if you want to sound really cool. But yeah, simultaneous learning, what does that mean? Well, we're going to try and sync up with our teachers teaching live from their classrooms so that students can learn from the benefit at home, if it's safer for them to be there, or if conditions with their family needs for them to be there while class is happening in line. And that is a synchronous model to meet up. But we're also pushing that the importance of recording that lesson so that those students who do have restrictions on time and can't make it for that time period can come back and learn at a pace that is respectable for them. And so that recording piece is why we call it simultaneous learning, so that the learning is happening all the time for our students. But it's part of the contingency plan, and what we're learning from this pandemic is we do have to be ready to flip the switch on the turn of a dime. So we need to look at, do we have the ability to that? That question came up earlier, and I'm glad to hear them be talking about it, but looking at the connectivity in your building. Are you going to have teachers only in the building that are going to be streaming and all of your students are at home? Are you going to have a condition of both? So that's a conversation that does need to happen in your building. Looking at your equipment and the equipment that's able to help you with that, looking at interactive panels, whether they're Zoom panels, Poly, Clever Touch, Smart, etc. What are the limitations? What are the expectations that the teachers can expect to use that equipment to help complement their instruction? And then you want to start building some tools and resources. The first thing we talked about in our group was virtual field trips using Google Expeditions, Discovery Education. Paul's given us a great site here. Paul, did you want to talk for just a second or two on the CILC link?
You bet. So the CILC is, there are museums and professional organizations around the world who would love to be able to provide a synchronous virtual field trip where you actually have a lesson that is being taught by that professional. So for example, the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, we're doing actually a summer connection with them later this week on balancing your, the food that you eat and using the resources that they have from their health portion of the museum to provide that lesson for the students. So field trips don't actually have to disappear completely. There are ways of doing it, and the CILC.org webpage is basically a collection of all of these that are searchable that you can then schedule. Some are free, some cost money. For example, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, those are all free. All of our national parks are free. There's some amazing resources out there that you should explore. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul. And then with virtual speakers, it's the same line as field trips. There's zero reason not to have people involved in your classroom and bringing in those guest speakers. One of the phenomenal resources we've stumbled across is Skype a Scientist. They have 5,000 scientists at their disposal that they can hook you up with in your science classes and talk to somebody who's in the field as you're doing some research. Playhouse Square, for those of you doing performance arts, they have a phenomenal education department. And if they have something going on down at Playhouse at the time, they will hook you up with the cast and crew of one of their productions. And of course, I know they haven't been doing a whole lot of that lately, but their education department will do online acting lessons and hook you up with the Cleveland Orchestra and all kinds of stuff. So look at your virtual speaker options, your field trip options, start accumulating that list of resources for your teachers to use as part of your contingency plan. Go ahead to the next slide, please. And I've also included here a simple resource file, something we've started building in the diocese, which is resources that include education software, some sites, extensions, and apps that your schools and your teachers can choose to move to remotely to help blend or flip your classroom and keep learning continuous for your students. You want to create a plan, as we said before, to keep things moving, to have in place, looking at your internet connection, which is of course the hardest part, devices at the ready, having a repair plan in place. How are you going to manage the devices from afar? We looked at things like GoGuardian. Some of us have used Umbrella, Securely, etc., to see if there's a way for us to not only look at internet device usage in the building, but while we're doing some at-home filtering as well. You want to look at your E-rate requirements because it is necessary to make sure that standards are in place, that all of the tools that you're using in your building for your teachers are SEPA and FERPA compliant. And there are requirements there for digital citizenship and filtering and stuff that needs to be taken in consideration as part of your contingency plan. We'll go ahead to the next slide. And I think this is where we stop for our portion on the contingency planning Q&A.
So, Mr. Smith, do you have any questions?
There is a question from earlier, from I think the previous segment, and that is, are there any thoughts on how to take special education needs into account?
This is Mary. Absolutely. That was very difficult in trying to accommodate and support our students that needed special accommodations. One of the things that we utilized at our school was the ability for some of our teachers, based on need, we provided them a Google Voice account so they were able to connect more directly as opposed to email with students and their parents and guardians. Communication was key. They utilized Google Meet and or Zoom when they were holding their IEP meetings. But I do want to share with you in the resources at the end, but I can also paste it here in the Q&A area, is Ohio Department of Education's publication on some considerations for schools, for students with disabilities. And of course, the main theme is flexibility and individualized support. I know that there were times where we do, at our school, we have this area called Attack, which is a tutoring area, a physical in our building for students, any students. It's open to all students who need a little bit more help or guidance in an area. Well, we had taken that group, they were awesome in creating their own Google Classroom and opening it up to everyone. And here students could select, let's say they were having a problem with the math question or needed some accommodation support. They would set up a time and a date with one of those to support them, and they would connect via Zoom. In our case, we use Google Meet, and their parent, intervention specialist, and whoever else needed to be in on that meeting, just for a little bit more one-on-one. But because the teachers were overwhelmed, we were fortunate enough to have the support services in place. But if you like, I can give you that link to ODE's publication.
And just to add that to what Mary said, yeah, the synchronous time frames, the office hours for our intervention specialists were key. They were definitely working overtime trying to make sure that each student's needs were met. But then we also got some support for them as well. So the guidance counselors kind of switched their role in trying to help shield from having to make constant contact with students who may have dropped off the engagement side, or to help support our learning intervention specialists. The guidance counselors kind of stepped in to help support that role.
And I'm going to jump in as well and to share that, you know, that we really felt that the breakout rooms were a key piece to that as well. The ability to pull students aside if we needed to kind of provide a little extra help during class periods, or for even some social emotional help when things were becoming challenging. So even in that live session, we did have some support pieces that were taking place as well.
We do have another question here. Sorry.
Go ahead, Christine. Go ahead, Christine.
Another opportunity that we did is that we scheduled for students that had IEPs and MAPs in place to have dedicated time with tutors in the resource center, as well as working individually with teachers during that time. So we set up Zoom events for participation between the two.
Okay, one more here. Our school has 2 security platforms. Is it necessary to have GoGuardian and Relay? I entered the tech position and found that one tech teacher ordered one and another purchased the next.
It happens all too often.
Technology inheritance, right?
I think we all been through that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I found that GoGuardian was pretty effective. I'm not too familiar with Relay, but it just depends on what one does over the other. So GoGuardian was primarily for protection of our students. We have a Barracuda filter in our building that watches both teachers and students. And is it some overlap? Yes. Are we probably overdoing with FERPA and SEPA? Maybe, but better over prepared than under, I suppose. And then GoGuardian really does have some great tools for the teacher side, for the student sides. And I just recently found out that they're going to be pushing a live portion, kind of like Teams and Meets and such, over the summer. So they're trying to expand. I guess it just depends on how much it's protected by either one and whether or not you need the overlap.
Okay, thank you. We don't have any other questions at this time.
All right, then I'm going to try to unshare my screen here. I think maybe someone else has to share for me to stop doing it. Here we go. I got it. We can turn this back over to Mike. And Mike, I'm happy to say that our group actually finished 10 minutes early, which I would have put money against a couple of days ago.
Very good.
Okay, bear with me just a second here.
Hey, Mike, while you're working on that, I want to address the question about GoGuardian and Relay. The ITCs have a filtering subcommittee, and we look at this on a regular basis. There's a lot of overlap between those two. And the one thing that we've noticed is GoGuardian, while it works great on Chromebooks for filtering, it doesn't filter the other devices. You have to jump through hoops to make non-Chromebook SIPA compliant. So if you have Relay, or something like that in place that is a necessity. Sorry, I was hearing some echo there.
We've got another one that just popped up. What are your thoughts on Cisco Umbrella?
I like Cisco Umbrella to a point. Doing any DNS-based filtering without something else behind it is a little, I would say, risky. But just because you've got DNS over HTTPS and so many other technologies there. So the Umbrella is also very costly compared to some of the other options. If you don't have a firewall if you have a firewall or some sort of catch-all traffic in place, then Umbrella is a great addition. But relying just on Umbrella or just on GoGuardian is probably a little bit risky on the CIPA compliance, unless only Chromebooks are in the hands of your students, and you have pretty well secure BYOD that ensures CIPA compliance for students.
Well, we use Umbrella, but the trick we found to make it work good is we force all DNS requests to the Umbrella servers at the firewall. All DNS is blocked at the firewall except for Umbrella.
We do the same thing.
Yeah, and I found it is better. We were using WebSense. I found Umbrella is better at blocking than WebSense, because when I told Umbrella to block shopping, you can't even go to gianteagle.com. It's blocking and it can force safe search in Google on YouTube, where WebSense was trickier. So I found it to be better, but I would suggest blocking all DNS at the firewall except for Umbrella.
We actually do that by default in our network. And the other thing that we've noticed, though, recently is DNS over HTTPS, which is Firefox and Chrome are trying to enforce by default. You need to make sure you have a plan in place for those as well.
Can't win one way or the other. Mike, if you're listening, Ryan still has been unable to get in. Apparently, he wasn't on that original email.
Yes, I know. I've been trying to contact him, and we might have to have him call.
I've got this. I can share my screen with the slides, but he's going to either have to call one of us or call Michelle or call in and talk.
Yeah.
Because he can't present on the phone.
Right. So you can run the slides for him.
I can do that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for the blended distance learning group? Okay. So we're going to move into the next group, the security group.
Okay, security starts with the end user. Your users are your first line of defense. Students, teachers, administrators, whoever. So having said that, let's move along to this one. And Ryan, I think this one's yours.
Actually, I think it's mine.
It's yours? Okay, it's Michelle's.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
fine. No, you're fine. So I would say the most appropriate thing to here to say about security is to err as human, because just like Dave said, it really, I mean, in our experience with Columbus City Schools, the majority of our issues with security have been common people mistakes, such as weak or stolen credentials. Obviously, there are lots of backdoors into applications that people need to close, clicking on phishing emails that open malware, social engineering, giving wide varieties of permission to people as opposed to locking systems down. We haven't had, I mean, I know it could happen, so I'm going to knock on wood for everybody on the call. Oops, and make my dog think there's someone at the door. But insider threats can obviously be an issue, physical attacks, and 100% user error. Next slide, sir.
So first thing we want to talk about is passwords. Oh, go up to present so this animation goes through correctly. Upper right. There you go. So for the audience here, most of us know what a bad password looks like, password and all those fun things. So what we do normally is go to a tougher password. Next slide. Oh, go back to your presentation. I don't know why I made that a link. Don't click on the bad passwords or click somewhere outside of the text. There you go. Go back to the presentation.
Mom,
So those are all links because I used that slide in my presentation. Slide down to the bottom and use the navigation bar to go to the next one, just to make sure you. There it is. Oh, wait, what? Go back one. So click to the left, on the left side of the screen, maybe. Yeah, there we go. See, it's not a finger. So we have better passwords, and a lot of us have seen these passwords. This one's not quite as good because you can see that there's a definite pattern between why we just replaced some of the vowels with numbers. So it's better, but it's not the best. Click again. So a lot better passwords. Anything less than 12 is a pretty bad password. So you look at my first two passwords there, and those are nice and secure. The problem is they're hard to remember, so you have to either write them down or use a password manager, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. The latest, as I've been researching how to do good passwords, the latest is using passphrases. And you see that caliber, graceful, coagulant, throwing. That is a lot more, that is a stronger password than the two previous ones. It's got length, and there's the spaces are another character. Now, when you look at that, you think, how can that be more secure? It's just 4 words from a dictionary. When you're looking at the regular passwords, each character of the password, like that first one, at PA2, da 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 da, each character, you're limited to approximately 90 choices for each one of those characters, upper, lowercase, and symbols. When you get down to passphrases, yes, there's only essentially 4 characters because there's 4 words, but each one of those could be 20 to 50,000 different combinations. So the numbers get very, very large, very, very quickly. And if you throw in a number in there, it gets even better. So as we move along, we want to try to get away from passwords and do the passphrases, because especially because the length is so much better and it's just so much harder to crack. And I have the use a passphrase there. And some places won't take a space as a special character, and they'll still require a capitalized character. So you could use this caliber, graceful, coagulant, throwing, put hyphens in between, capitalize one of the letters, and then throw a number on the end. And you'll satisfy almost every single password checker. Now, the problem with using passphrases is you have, I'm looking at you, banking sites. Banking sites, for all of that, for everything that they pushed on the banking sites, they're terrible with password security. That 4-letter one, a lot of banking sites will throw that out because, whoa, you're more than 16 characters. I can't do that. I just can't handle storing that much space. So you probably have to shorten them just because banking sites are terrible. Next slide. And here's our requisite XKCD comic on why it's so much harder to guess at if you use words instead of using a passphrase. Now, the secret to using a passphrase is use a random passphrase like that. Use a passphrase.com. Don't just come up with your own words for the passphrase because it won't be very random. Next slide. So, passwords and passphrases, when we're talking about security, are something you know. 2-factor, we add a different factor to the authentication, and most of them, the second factor is what you have. And then there's a third factor, what you are. That's the biometric the Face ID on the Apple phones or the face identification that's on some of the Android phones. That's a third factor. We're not going to cover that today. But two-factor authentication, something you have. So not only for an attacker to take over your account, they have to have your password, username, password, and something you have, which hopefully is something you have under physical. Google makes that really easy to use the Gmail app. So if I try to sign into a Google account, Gmail on my phone's going to pop up a message saying, hey, did you just try to sign in? And I can say, yes, I did. If that pops up and I didn't try to sign in, something's up, and I'll know to check into that. The YubiKey there, the key on the keychain, that's something you physically have to plug into a USB port, and that little Y lights up, and you have to put your finger on that little Y to authenticate. The other way is SMS. SMS is the lowest. It's better than nothing, but there's been SIM hijacking where the attacker will clone your SIM. If they have your phone number, they can clone your SIM and they can get into your two-factor that way. So that's pretty, I don't think any of us in this has to worry about that happening, but it's still something to think about. And Google Authenticator, I use Authy, and Authy has the same problems with the SMS because Authy uses SMS to authenticate. Authy, though, lets me take my two factors on multiple devices pretty easily. Google Authenticator is locked to one. So we're starting to push this out as much as possible in our district. If nothing else, start with your treasurer's office. Get them using two-factor because they get phishing scams all the time trying to transfer money. Okay, next slide. I'm talking too long. So along with using the passphrase, start to use a password manager. When I did this presentation at OETC back in February, one of the persons was confused on the password managers because they thought you copied and pasted passwords all the time. No, all of these have an extension because most of the time you're using your password in the browser. So it's just like the autofill, and you can use your browser's password manager if you want. I jump between browsers. My current favorite browser right now is Firefox. So I was using Brave, Vivaldi, Chrome. I like to jump around. So I can't just use one. I can't use the browser password manager. So check these out. Bitwarden is the one I'm currently using personally, but at school we use LastPass, and we started out with LastPass. The reason we use LastPass at school, the main reason is we can share our passwords. So our tech department can have access to the passwords for various services, all shared, secure. We don't have to worry about it. Now, another complaint people will have on passwords is if LastPass gets hacked, somebody has access to all of our passwords. LastPass cannot recover your passwords. Your passwords are encrypted before they even get to LastPass. LastPass only has encrypted copies, so they can't. So, and that's hurts you too. If you forget your password for LastPass, say goodbye to all your passwords because LastPass and all of these work that same way. None of them will be able to save you if you lose your password because they can't. The math is set up so they cannot lose your password. Okay, next phrase, next page. Okay, I'm done. Woo.
I think physical security is mine, and I'm using Bitwarden, and I like it because it is saving me lots of work. Some basic measures for physical security is training. Teachers and students what to do when they get a phishing email, what to do if they see a potential intruder, what they should do as far as all this stuff. Your buildings ideally should be monitored, especially places that are critical to keep secure. Wireless cameras these days are not very expensive, and you can have some wireless cameras that can record things, which makes a great thing if you need to contact law enforcement if things are going on. It's great for lots of reasons, even if it's not somebody trying to break into the building. If there's an issue involving students someplace, You may have a camera recording it. Makes it a lot easier when they say, I didn't do nothing. You have evidence. Security personnel, which in most districts, most people don't have the money to pay for security personnel. So your cameras are a great way to do this. Your interior doors. Really, your classroom doors and doors that, as many doors as possible should be locked during the day. I like to keep my classroom door open, especially when it's nice so I have air circulation. But the door is locked, so if the door closes, you're not getting in. One of the things we started last year or the year before when we started the ALICE program, we put intruder resistant things on all of our doors. It's a piece of metal that is drilled a couple of inches down into the concrete floor and slides into the base of the door. You are not opening that door if that strip is in there. The students know that if they mess with it, I don't even want to speculate on what the consequences will be. And there is a way, though, for administration or maintenance, if somebody decides to play with it, there is a way to get that bar off of the door with someone that has the proper tool. Your IT spaces really should be on separate keys. The classroom key should not open the server room. Probably only IT folks and maybe administrators should have access to that space, and I'll put administrators in maybe. Sometimes I don't know if I want administrators getting into my server room, especially if they don't know what to touch. Badges or lanyards. All of our students now have, and teachers are supposed to wear lanyards, although sometimes I've seen a student named Bob with a student named Joe's lanyard on. How that happens, I don't know. If you have a chip or a strip on those, you have other uses. It can be used for your lunches. You can put parents can put money in it for lunch. We've implemented paper cuts to manage our printing costs. Well, you can use the chip or the strip can be attached to copy machines for paper cut. So they can authenticate to a copy machine for paper. So it has some other uses besides identification. Possibly a secure vestibule, a man trap type thing or a person trap. This allows somebody to come into the building, have their driver's license or ID card scanned, to do a quick scan to make sure they're not on any prohibited list for child abuse, child molesting, or some other lists. It's not a thorough scan, but at least gives you a little bit to make sure that that ID card hopefully belongs to the person who's holding it. So it can try and prevent forged ID. I put 2 of them up there. Michelle uses a different one. Michelle, what does Columbus use?
Lobby guard.
Lobby guard. And they're all pretty similar. It basically means the person coming in doesn't get into the building until their ID is scanned. And you can create safe lists like these people, like if you have parents and volunteers that come in to help out with things, you can put them on a safe list so they can have a badge and don't need to be scanned every time they come in. But this is a way to keep your building secure right away. Ransomware and phishing. Users, again, train your users to spot phishing emails. Ryan, I think, has got some samples coming up down the line. Train them to spot phishing emails. Delete it. If you're not sure, hit the delete key. I tell my students, because I teach security and IT classes, I tell them never be upset if a user asks if an email is suspicious. 5 minutes of you doing some quick research can save hours of recovery from a potential phishing attachment. You know, Ryan's going to go into a bunch of ways, and there's a company called KnowBe4 that has lots of things about this. I think we have the link later on. The only thing I'm going to recommend with KnowBe4, if you can get away with it, get an email address that you don't care gets a lot of junk emails, because they will try and contact you. And they're trying to sell stuff. If you're running a Windows network and you don't need the encrypting file system, turn it off. I've seen crypto lockers that try and use encrypting file system to do their nastiness. Antivirus. A lot of antiviruses can help detect ransomware. Make sure it can. Malwarebytes is a free product that can also help detect ransomware, and I believe they do have some ransomware recovery. Remember, recovering from ransomware is a crapshoot. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And the general belief is don't pay the ransomware people, because I don't know how much I would trust people that just put ransomware and malware on my computer from some country halfway around the world. Although some of these folks actually have help desks now. Content filters, especially the DNS-based content filters like Umbrella and a few others. Umbrella is OpenDNS that Cisco bought and took over. It blocks the ransomware. Some of the ransomware phones home to start running. Umbrella can actually block that. One comment, if you are using especially a DNS content filter, make sure that your firewall is blocking all other DNS resolution. This also stops somebody from trying to get around it. Backups.
Oh, and somebody also mentioned in the earlier session, and I forgot about this when we were talking about this, DNS is going over HTTPS now.
Yeah.
So that adds a nice little wrinkle to DNS blocking.
It's a defense in depth.
Yeah.
And really the best recovery tool from ransomware is a good backup. You need to air gap them. Your backups should not be stored on MAP drives or NAS drives that are connected to your network. You need to, down and dirty, you connect the USB drive, copy it over, and take them off site. I've seen some backup appliances where you pop the hard drive out after each backup ran. When I was doing some research on this a few years ago, I've seen that. The best ones are automated, that they just run. You don't worry about them except for the email that said it ran. Test your restore capability. Test your restore capability because you don't want to find out that the backup hasn't worked for 3 months all of a sudden when you need it. When I was consulting, I saw clients that had backups that hadn't worked in a year or two because, we only call the guy when something breaks. When you have backup is a year old. Test your restore capability. We all know, most of us, that backups, we generally restore from a backup when somebody fat fingers a file. They accidentally deleted a file, they accidentally messed it up. Most of our restores are for that. Somebody earlier was talking about retention periods. Don't keep your backups longer than you legally are required to. If somebody decides for a court case, they may say, give us all of your backups. You may have them going back way too far. Only keep what you have to. You may want to think about backing up certain key desktops, especially if they have some custom software on that people need and it's a pain to configure. There's a lot of the image software allows you to get away with using it for free or very inexpensive. Macrium is my current flavor of free backup utility. I run it on mine at home. 3 that are good for backing up that can do all of this stuff. Barracuda backups, I think, are really good. I use them at school and a bunch of other places. It is a proprietary operating system that backs up over the network. It's a customized version of Linux. It automatically replicates to the cloud. And if you keep all your support and everything current, in 4 years, you get a new one. Veeam is also really good. I use that a lot. They also have a pre-product if you just need to back up a Windows server and you don't need anything really fancy. Veeam Free will take care of that quite nicely. And it'll back it up. It backs it up to a NAS drive, yes, on the free version. The paid-for version also has connections where you can use AWS, Amazon Web Services, to do a backup to them or any other Veeam partner that has the capability to back up to the cloud. If you're using Microsoft's Hyper-V, Altaro is a good alternative for that. Back in the day, Backup Exec was another good backup product. It's kind of fallen by the wayside. Some of these guys are better. And also on the email side, if you're doing email in-house and you need a good filter, Barracuda makes a great spam filter. And they also provide a lot of products for 365 if you're on that platform. I think, Ryan, you're next.
No, that's me. That's Michelle.
Okay.
Notice the apple. So just to add on to some of the things that Dave was just talking about, when it comes to backups, we did actually lose an entire SAN one time. Of course, we were able to restore it, but we have since gone to cloud storage with a third-party provider, not Amazon. We actually pay a real handsome price for it because I can tell you when they're gone and it takes 3 days to bring them back, it's pretty scary for the district. So, of course, we do everything on a little larger scale than the other two that I'm with, but I thought I'd talk a little bit about our experience with phishing. I think you can go to the next slide, Ryan. So what I put out here before I talk about two of our largest ones is some of my favorite examples. This Bank of America went out probably a year ago to us and caused us to have our very first large incident. And if you can see in the things that you should be, when you're training your staff, things that they should be looking for is obviously this looks pretty legit, but they would not be sending you something to activate your account or to sign into your account when it says Dear Member. If you're looking at who it's from, while it says Bank of America, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't list an email address, but if it does, then obviously they wouldn't be sending it from a Comcast.net account, a personal account. And if it doesn't, if you hover over it, that's always a good way to find that. I'm sure you know that. But again, some of the key things that you don't think about are if they're asking you to sign into your account, they would not be sending this to undisclosed recipients. So that's a big one. And of course, you know, when we're training, we always say don't log into something from an email and give your credentials. You should always call the place or call the company or whoever's sending it to you, because they should never ask for that information. And sometimes they do and they shouldn't, but it's important to also say that if there's a phone number listed in the email, don't call that one. Actually call the company, look up the number for the company, because you're probably calling the bad actor, and you know, it's just going to even get worse for you. So next slide, please. This is another one of my favorites that happens. This one's a really bad one. They have cleaned them up, of course. So it usually comes from a principal. In our school settings, it usually comes from a principal and goes out to the staff in the building or any staff that they've had in their email for their entire careers. And obviously asking them to go get gift cards, scratch off the code, send them a picture. You know, I kind of have to laugh when this happens because there's nothing I can do, but obviously, wouldn't you call your principal and say, why are you asking me to do this? Can't I just bring you the card? So that's just a common one, and people really do fall for it. And when I bring it up in training, people just kind of laugh, and I have to say, look at your neighbors. One of you has done it, I'm sure. So next slide. And this one is my all-time favorite because people do this all the time, and this wreaks havoc for sure. And it says right at the top, why is this email spam? But people see a $1,000 gift card, click here, and that they've won. And I'm pretty sure that our local grocery stores and Walmart and many other companies are not giving away $1,000 gift cards just because you got an email. So again, this one does not look legit to me, nor does the last one, but they've gotten more clever, and these are kind of older examples, but you know, obviously beware. So next slide, please. So don't get hooked, obviously. Let me talk about a couple quickly of the two largest ones that have hit Columbus City schools. And the first one was a couple of years ago, and then again last year it hit us, and that was a Green Dot Bank scam. So what the bad actors were doing were they would log into your email, or they would send you an email, you would enter your credentials, they would change your password, and then go into our ERP solution and change your password in the ERP solution and change the routing and checking number on your account to Green Dot Bank. Luckily, we had a safeguard in place where if you change your checking and routing information online with our district, then you're going to receive a paper check as a verification for the first time. So luckily we weren't out any funds, but it definitely brought in two-factor authentication very quickly. We had to actually kind of threaten our ERP provider to say, you know, you were hacked really, so we need to get this fixed, and they worked with us. So we have two-factor authentication now on our employee self-service, but these, the same group that does those type of hacking incidents or phishing incidents also route all of the mail that they're sending back and forth to the bad actors to your junk mail or to your spam file. So if you're never going in there, you would never notice it, and they also can stay active in your account for a long time. So that's obviously, I think Dave mentioned, you know, financials are the first person, or maybe Ryan did. 100% anybody with more than a user ID should, or a general user ID should be two-factor authentication on anything. We use Active Directory, so all of our administrators, anybody who's a system administrator, anybody at the administrator level has two-factor authentication, as well as a number of our departments, HR specifically, and financials, budget, superintendent's office, they all are on two-factor authentication. So the one that we're working on right now is a doozy for sure. We have an employee who does certifications for the district, I-9s, banks call for house loans. So there were a number of things. Social security numbers. We don't use the social security number front facing. We use the employee ID, but a number of times you're asked to provide, or when they send a request, they send it to you with a social security number. So this one is so far, the first spreadsheet of social security numbers was 1,200. We're looking at over 3,000 to 4,000 records that have to be, that we're going to have to provide some type of assistance and annual assistance. So all said and done, we're going to be around 5,000 to 7,000 accounts that had some kind of personal information, whether it be medical, driver's license, passports, social security numbers, and the only two, just fun fact, the only two states that require you to provide protection for a birth date only are North Dakota and Washington, the state of Washington. So we had a couple of those too. So all that to be said is both of those very large, very costly incidents were user error. They saw something that looked like the Bank of America type letter and entered their Active Directory credentials. So all that to be said is stop and think before clicking. I know this is repeat, but the more times you repeat it to people, and we send things out like this on the regular, very catchy looking propaganda, I guess you will, to remind users. But in addition to just communicating it, I don't know where you all are on cyber insurance, but we would be in a world of hurt without it. So for the very first large incident, we did not have it. We were actually negotiating a price at the time. But since that time, we have paid for it. And I can tell you it's the best $75,000 I've ever spent, because it has saved us. I mean, it's really helping out in this current situation for sure. It definitely pays for itself. Required training is, I mean, I can't stress it enough. I've done training where I dressed up like in phishing gear and took 5 minutes to just talk about this particular slide and a couple others in front of as many people as I could live at beginning of school year meetings. And I can tell you, we didn't have an incident until this very last one, and we had it in June. So we did much better, but training. And then again, the passwords. I can't stress enough how important two-factor authentication is. Again, we're very large, so we have a large, we have 52,000 students and around 10,000 employees. So there's a lot of, we generate a lot of mail, we generate a lot of access to applications. So, making sure those are changed, but also on your back end, that those admin passwords are changed very, very regularly. But yeah, your quickest defense is to change a password and require training for everybody. So I think that's it for my slides. Next.
Michelle and Dave and I talked about this when we were discussing our slides, but I don't think we have a slide for it. Phishing also happens over the phone.
Oh yeah.
We're talking about just computers, but the latest scam is the scammer will call you pretending to be the bank, while at the same time, a scammer's accomplice will call your bank pretending to be you. So the scammer calling you can ask you questions that the bank is asking the scammer's accomplice and relay those answers back and forth so they can pretend to be you reliably to the bank, which is just it's kind of brilliant. But if the bank ever calls you, say, okay, let me call you back, hang up, and then call the bank. Never give out information to somebody that's just calling you.
And there's no before. I use a video with my kids. I wish I would have put it up there. Somebody at the Vegas Consumer Electronics Show, in like 5 minutes, calls a guy's cell phone provider, pretends to be his bride with a crying baby from YouTube, and gets all kind of access to his cell phone account because she does the crying wife with the crying baby, and he didn't do any of this stuff before he got married. Feel sorry for me routine. And the kids just look at it and go, wow. This is no before. They have a lot of free, they have some paid for stuff, but they have a lot of free things that are actually pretty good. They actually have one that plugs into Outlook that if you click it, it throws a pop-up at you that says, do you really want to go to this link that you just clicked on? It could be malware. So it's like an extra think twice.
So we don't really want to talk about products that much, even though we just talked about no before. If you are a Google school, this is what we've turned on at Kenton to protect about spoofing. So Google will pop up a warning once you have those turned on when somebody's trying to pretend to be an employee of the school. You know, it's this one. This is our high school principal, even though they reversed the first and last name. But when somebody from the school gets a message, it will pop up this big yellow banner saying, hey, this is the name of somebody in your organization. You might not want to trust what's going on in here. So if you're a Google school, go in and look at turning on some of these things. I've also, at Kenton, any zip attachments gets redirected to me. Now, you know, we didn't introduce ourselves. Kenton is a semi-small district, about 1,800 students. So I can do this. Any zip file that's coming into the district comes to me first before it goes to the person. It's just kind of one layer on there. I don't have to rely on any spyware, malware. It's always going to come to me, and then I can look at it and think, okay, this is real or this is not. I've got one message. He sent it out again today. It looks like it's from another school district, but I replied to him saying, is this a legitimate email? Because it looks fishy, and they haven't replied back. So I'm not going to forward that message on until I get a reply. This is one way to be a little bit safer. File security. I think this was me. If you use laptops in your district, congratulations. Use the default, all the Macs, basically. If you buy a new Mac, I don't think you can turn off, to turn off encryption of the hard drive on a Mac is pretty hard. They'll encrypt automatically. Windows, unless you're running Windows Home on them, they have BitLocker installed and you can encrypt the drives. Even if you don't think you have anything of consequence on the drives, you know, back to the very first slide, users are your worst enemy. They will undoubtedly save something to that laptop. You don't want to have to deal with, well, the laptop got stolen. What's on there? What do we have to do? And when it comes to USB drives, just don't. There's no reason today to use USB drives for anything. Unless you, I take that back. I shouldn't say there's no reason. If you have air-gapped servers and equipment, then look at using some USB drives for that. And you can encrypt the USB drives. There's several pieces of software, so you can do those. But for the most part, don't use USB drives. I've been having there's a learning gap with some of the staff members on using cloud storage to transfer files. We're Google school, so they think if they upload a Word document to Google Drive to share it with somebody, that Google is going to transfer that to Google Docs and they're going to lose everything. So it's an ongoing education. No, it's not going to convert your document. You'll be fine. Network security. I don't know who wants to start here.
You can.
So for our filtering, our baseline of defense is I run our own domain name servers, and there's several block lists available on the internet for DNS to block a majority of the bad sites. So that's our first line of defense is DNS filtering, and outside DNS servers are blocked, so you can't port 4053 is blocked, so you can't access those. So that's our first line of defense. And then our second line of defense is we install GoGuardian on all of our Chromebooks, K through 12, 1-to-1. So we have GoGuardian pushed out to all of those for our second line of defense, and it works pretty well.
And we use Umbrella, and likewise DNS is blocked at the firewall. I'm debating if I want to put the Umbrella and the GoGuardian on Chromebooks because I'm concerned I'm going to have two different layers of filtering to manage and which one's going to be getting in the way. Inside the building, Umbrella is going to work automatically. I just don't know if I want to put an app on the Chromebooks beyond GoGuardian. Because when they take them home, which one is going to win? Ryan, I think this one's you.
So our district, we do it a little bit different for Wi-Fi. Our Wi-Fi is totally open. You don't need a password. You just come in and you can connect to our Wi-Fi. My reasoning is we're blocking through DNS and we have filters in place, so you're not going to get to anything that you're not supposed to be getting to. And also, it's taxpayer funded. Our taxpayers are paying for this network. They're paying for this Wi-Fi. I think they should be allowed to use it without jumping through. I had a farmer that was using drones to do mapping of fields, and he lived out in the country and was having a tough time because the maps are pretty huge to upload. So I said, just pull up any one of our schools and get on the Wi-Fi and you can use our connection to get through there. So I view it as a public service to the community, and that's why we don't close anything. We took off almost everything we use is cloud-based now, so there's no reason to segment different networks in the buildings because there's really nothing that you can get to that is on premise anyway. So that's our so basically this whole discussion goes down to what are you and your community comfortable with? Michelle and Dave, you want to add to that?
Well, we're being a private school. We still have the internal network, although I think everybody and their brother knows the SSID.
Well, oh, go ahead, Dave.
I see Ryan's point about if it's being tax supported, just letting people use it. As long as you have as long as you're comfortable and you have the capability and bandwidth, I don't see a problem with that.
So this is Michelle Van Dyke with Columbus City Schools, and we're probably since we are the largest, we do ours a little differently. We have it segregated into 3 distinct areas. We have teacher student account that, or instance that allows our school buildings to run on the Wi-Fi, and it's obviously a different set of content filtering. And then we also have a guest network, which we've slowed down tremendously. So we allow guests to do what they need to do during board meetings and while they're in our buildings, but we also don't let them enjoy streaming music or videos. And we also have authenticated. So if we have someone in that we know is going to be doing some type of a presentation, or we're doing some kind of an online field trip within one of our buildings, we can have them authenticate into our network so that they aren't blocked and they can do what they need to do and aren't going to have any issues. But we definitely have a lot of traffic, obviously, and we have opened them up in the building so that, but you have to authenticate into it to get it. I mean, we've opened them up so they reach farther out into our school district areas. So students are able to come to the school building, park in the parking lot, go to the football field, do what they need to do if they're having any issues with their at-home Wi-Fi or with the hotspots that we provide to them. So we have let it go outside the walls, but only you can only get into it through authentication.
Ryan, this one you, I think.
Oh, whoops. Didn't mean to do that. That was my bad. One piece of the filtering I forgot to mention at Kenton is that DNS filter that we use as our first line of defense also affects the staff, but nobody gets an override. No one has unfiltered access in the district. If they need access to something, then I'm assuming it's educational purposes, and the students also need access to it, is how I view it. So luckily, but filtering's a local, it's whatever your community is comfortable with.
We do Active Directory and allow teachers have more access than students. Port blocking.
So we block everything, and then we have an allow list of list supports, which is getting pretty big, but it works for us. Port blocking, and we're talking about port blocking. Ports are what all the internet services run, all the network services run on. Web is over port 80 and port 443. DNS is over port 53, so on and so forth. So we block them all on the Wi-Fi, and then we allow different ports. We don't really do much blocking with Ethernet ports because there's hardly any devices that are on wired network anymore.
I would say every port inbound should be blocked unless you have a reason to leave it open. And if vendors love to say you need to have these ports open to communicate, but keep them as minimal as possible. Because
yes,
every port that's open is another way for something to get in.
Yes. I think we're gonna go through this pretty quickly because we have our 10-minute warning, 11-minute warning. So proxy versus VPN. Yeah. I'm not even gonna. We're just gonna skip it because this audience doesn't need
privacy
as much as about the privacy.
Okay. If you're using school equipment, you have no expectation of privacy. It's the same rule that applies here as applies to why a school district can pop open kids' lockers. The school owns the school owns the devices, therefore they have the ability to look at them. So if you're doing your income taxes on your school computer and it breaks, guess what? And I mean, I've had, and the same with if you are running your side business on a school computer, don't. Admins can see that personal info, and there's no promise data is going to be kept during maintenance. I upgraded tons of computers to Windows 10 last year, and there were a few people that were upset because their stuff they had on the local computer disappeared. And the flip side of that is
the desktop is the most important file storage place.
if you know what you're doing. If you don't, that's why God invented file servers or cloud storage. Personal devices. If there's a court case, your personal device could be seized for that court case if you are using it to communicate with your students. You need to really think through, should students have your personal cell phone numbers? If it's a school-owned device, no problem, but if it's your personal phone number, should students have that number and be texting and being able to call you? That's something you really need to think through, because it could end up in court. I'm not saying anybody's going to do anything they shouldn't, but it could be something totally unrelated that gets that phone into court because you're using it for school purposes. You could buy the burner phones at the grocery store, or if you want, I have a Google phone number. When I was calling students to help them set up things, I use my Google phone number to call. So I didn't want them to have my personal phone number. If you have an IP-based phone system, you can get an app on your phone that makes it look like you're using your school number. So you can use the app on your phone and make it look like you're calling from school. So they would call your school number and they wouldn't know the difference. You need an acceptable use policy because it's required by E-rate. You may want to consider one for the teachers, one for the students. Your teachers, should have limitations on what they're doing too. This can prevent many issues because now everything is there. Be detailed. Unfortunately, these days, that's why things become many, many pages, is because of legal issues, and certainly run it by your legal counsel. It should be applicable to any school-owned device or network. In other words, your AUP, if they're using Wi-Fi, even though it might be their own phone, if they're on your Wi-Fi network, they should be covered by your acceptable use policy. I threw a couple of free ones up there that you can look at. You can take those and modify as much as you want. I actually had my students create one for Spacely Sprockets during the course of the year, and we can have a good discussion on should devices be owned by the company or by the person, and we have some good discussion on the privacy issue, because high school kids, that's something, kind of important to them. So it's something to think about when you're using your personal device to contact a student. Okay, now let's see if I lost my mouse on here. Ryan, can you click that? Somehow
Looks like
there we go. Oh, this is a great one.
Yeah. And on the burner phones, I went on swappa.com, bought a Samsung S8 and threw it on TrackPhone. It cost me about $7 a month, but that way it's totally separate. That's my work phone. Right. Carrying two phones is a pain, but I'd rather do that than deal with issues. So I don't know who wants to talk about this. Michelle? I can if you.
I can. I mean.
So when we're talking about doing things, so okay, we know you're going to do some personal things on your laptop. Yeah, but don't do it during a board meeting, especially if you're a board member. So they took a picture of a board member doing some shopping on ThreadUp. Apparently, they needed some new clothes. She needed some new clothes, but they pulled up the public records, pulled up her browsing history, and put it out there for all to see that, yeah, she wasn't even paying attention to the board meeting.
Comment on the privacy thing also, and I'm pretty sure in a public school district, all of your emails and communications are probably subject to public records requests. So be careful what you're saying about students and staff via school-owned emails.
Yeah, if you're going to say something bad about your staff, just say it to their face.
Or yeah, because that's all subject to records requests.
So we have 5 minutes, so we're going to go through this pretty quickly. Tracking. Everything you do online can be tracked, no matter what. If you're using your personal, if you're using your professional equipment, you're going to be tracked by different entities. And I'm just going to make fun of Facebook here because Facebook's terrible at it. Facebook, if you're signed into Facebook in a browser, every website that you go to that has something from Facebook on it, whether it's a like or discussion boards, Facebook knows you visited that site. And so a lot of these sites do that. If you're signed into any of them, yes, Facebook's going to track you and know exactly what you're doing, where you're doing it. Facebook is also, this is a way you're tracked that you might not even know you're tracked. My dad does not have a Facebook account. I'm almost positive Facebook has a profile built for him because he has been mentioned by his wife or the kids or the grandkids. And Facebook, if you mention somebody, Facebook says, okay, who is this person that they are mentioning? Oh, we don't know this person. We're going to start tracking other mentions of this person and build a profile. So it's really scary what they can do. When you're at school, on the school network, they can track everything that you're doing. They can't see the traffic. So when you're going to check your email, all of that's encrypted. So they don't know what's in the message. They just know who the services are using. So like that board member that was going to see ThreadUp, they pulled up her Google history to see that, but that information's also can be logged on the network and what she did. So even you're still tracked. As you walk through the building, if you have a smartphone on you, your Wi-Fi access points are paying attention to where you're going in the building. Bluetooth beacons are becoming a thing where they are tracking you from your Bluetooth going through the building. So a lot of schools aren't doing much with this tracking yet because they're just afraid of once that gets out, the repercussions from the community. But some school districts are looking at, well, I can use Wi-Fi to track my kids when they go to the bathroom and who's where. And this will become even bigger with the contact tracing and the pandemic with this fall. So I don't know where we're going to go with that. Finally, one way that you're tracked that you might not even think about it. This was about 6 months to a year ago. The big thing was to type Florida man and your birthday into Google and see what stories come up that happened on your birthday. Well, when you share those, then now everybody knows when your birthday is. Now, birthday might not be a piece of private information, but when you start doing those quizzes like which Star Trek captain am I, you are giving out a ton of information about you just to find out that you're not Captain Kirk, you're Captain Picard.
Couple things.
Yeah,
a couple things I wanted to add about Facebook too, and all social media. Don't be sharing the pictures of your wonderful vacation to Disney World while you're still at Disney World. You've just given, and my kids can do this speech perfectly. You've just given every crook in town a sign that says, "Mr. Burglar, nobody's home. Come steal my stuff." And you know all those places that asks for your mother's maiden name and your password hint? Give your mother a phony maiden name, because with social media these days, how hard is it to find a woman's maiden name online?
And that's a good point. I've started to do this. When you do those security questions, don't answer them reliably. I actually use a passphrase to answer the questions, and then I save those in my password manager, the answers that I used. So if I do have to use password recovery, they're totally random answers to the questions. And that way I don't have to. There's a staff member in my district who is exactly 2 years younger than me. We share the same birthday. I had to help him reset an account, and every single one of his questions I could answer and I'm not even close friends with him. It's just I knew we shared a birthday, and then I knew things about him. So that's a good point. When you're answering those questions, answer them randomly and then put them in your password manager.
And this is something to work with your students on. Have them be conscious of what they put on social media, because I know many companies now, when they interview somebody, have a candidate for a job, the first place they go is to look up their social media presence. And too many people don't get a job that they're deserving of because of what they have posted on social media. So have your student.
and people are being fired from places based on what they posted on social media.
I like
So
my
even after
social
you get
media
the job,
I like my social media presence. None.
mine's all on my website, and I know if I'm going to post it there, it's out there public. So I only post little dippy funny things. So
Any questions from anybody? I'm not.
apparently we covered this so well.
Well, if anybody has any questions, they can always email us or anything like that, I guess.
Yeah.
We have had a few come in. We've just moved them over into the published area on the Q&A. And
Yeah, I've answered a couple of them.
Yeah.
Let me get my mouse and see what's up there. Can't find my mouse.
But the internet never forgets. You can go back to archive.org and look at past versions of websites. I pulled up my old ryancollins.org site posts from 15 years ago, and they're all still there. But I know if I'm posting it publicly.
You know, if anybody has hardware questions or anything like that, I just saw somebody was talking about Meraki. Meraki is great, but it's like all things Cisco. They're great, but they're not cheap.
Yeah, it was our new building. That's why we're Meraki, because our new building came with all Meraki. And so that's kind of forced our hand. Luckily, E-Rate's paying for 80% of it. So
yeah, Ubiquity stuff is really good. I have it at home and I've put them in. The price is not bad. The only downside to Ubiquity is their support is not that good. You have to chat with them to do it, but their stuff is pretty easy to set up. And I found Ubiquity to be better than going and buying the fancy, cool-looking consumer routers and Wi-Fi. I've got the Ubiquity extended range. I can get it out in the backyard.
yeah, we were Ubiquity before we switched to Meraki, and it worked really well. I have noticed once we switched to Meraki, some weird Wi-Fi issues disappeared. And I don't know I don't know where that came from, because, you know, a big Ubiquity that you have in 4 years ago is going to be totally different than the one from currently because of software upgrades. So I don't want to blame Ubiquity for that, because it could just have been when we got the Meraki, Wi-Fi issues had been worked out. So I don't know. But yeah, Ubiquity's great.
Michelle, what are you planning on using for cleaning your devices? Ryan answered earlier, but discard his answer.
For cleaning as in?
Devices.
In the classroom.
Oh, we just, so we just wipe everything clean at the end of the year. Most all of our kids use, most all of our kids are using Chromebooks. So we don't have any storage on the Chromebooks. We have thin clients in the classrooms as well, so they have to use their personal share files.
They don't mean cleaning up files. They mean cleaning of germs.
Oh, yeah.
I like your response to that, Ryan.
So our kids we haven't had anybody in the buildings for so long. We're calling them clean, I'm sure, right now. If someone brings back a device, we're not one-to-one going into this. So I deployed out about 20,000 Chromebooks to people who needed them for a home device as well as hotspots. So if you bring that back, because we have a certain office hours for you to come to one of our data center locations to have your Chromebook work done, but generally what we do is just put it in a box and hand them a new one and re-register them with the new Chromebook, and then we wait a certain period, and then we lightly spray them with the hospital grade sanitizer looks like we're spraying weeds, and then we let them sit another few days, and then we fix them. And all of our techs, anybody who's in the building is wearing mask and gloves for each Chromebook. So if you pick up a Chromebook and work on it, you have a set of gloves. You throw the gloves away, pick up the next one and work on it. But they sit for at least 10 days before they're repaired. Does that
And
help?
we're 1-to-1 K through 12. So for devices, they just use their own device. But we have meetings all day today on how this fall is going to look like, and we haven't discussed how we're doing a cleaning protocol. So Chad, yeah, I did a sneaky response to your question because we don't have one yet.
There's a new question out there about computer carts.
What was it? Anywhere Cart is the company I found at OETC. They tended to have a pretty good price.
Well, is the question, what's the question? We don't use carts at all.
We
But
do in
are we-
some
are
locations,
they
but
asking
what is
for-
are you looking for an actual cart or did you have a question? We are
Yes,
using
yeah.
them.
So we did have a couple of carts before we went 1-to-1. We went to Global Warehouse. Is that it? They had some $800 carts that had outlets for 24 in them. I can't comprehend spending 15 to $2,000 on a cart like some people are doing. When $800 you get a decent cart.
I think mine, Anywhere Cart, I think I got one with a 36 unit capacity. It was like $900.
Yeah, ours
Yeah.
is about that too. I can get you the information if you email me. But I mean, they're pretty much just used for charging at this point. Back in the day, when we first started getting Chromebooks, we didn't have district-wide wireless, so they had access points on them, but we don't buy them typically now, but some people still like them and, use them as charging stations, so.
They
Well, I think the
just
question
clarified
was,
the question. They're asking about sanitizing and cleaning
Ah,
regarding the cart.
Same thing. Yeah, we just don't use them as much. We certainly don't use them now that all of our students are using some kind of a device. So they sit for a long time, I can tell you, empty before they're even used again. But we have this hospital grade, like HP. It's not HP. I just say that because it sounds like a computer, but like P5 or something. I don't know what it is, but we just lightly spray everything. And then, like I said, we don't touch anything that's been used for at least 7 to 10 days.
I think they're kicking us off.
Yeah, we're a little bit over for your group.
Oh, okay. If anybody
So-
has any questions, though, I'm more than happy to answer them. And I'm at mvandyke@columbus.k12.oh.us. Please feel free to send me anything.
Likewise, it's chrisand@ths.org. Or just Mike can probably kick those out.
HollandArt@KentuckySchools.org. But yeah,
All right.
Mike probably should just send out a email with all of our emails.
I'm going to kill this. Somebody else can take over the screen because I think we're done.
Okay, well, I'll take over then. Next up is the connectivity group with Mark Hopkins, Holly North, and Chris Lockhart. This will be the last session of the day. Somebody's
Good morning,
typing
everybody.
loud.
All right, it's me answering a question.
Okay,
All right, good morning, everybody. Most of you know me. My name is Mark Hopkins. I first want to introduce my co-panelists, actually have them introduce themselves. First up from Summit Country Day, Miss Holly Northern. Holly?
Hi, I am the technology director at Summit Country Day School. I have been here for 20 years, so long time here. And just about our school, we're a private independent Catholic school, and we now go down to 18 months up to grade 12. Some of our challenges with connectivity that we'll be discussing have to do with the fact that I live in a 130-year-old school building. So we've got 18-inch thick walls and various challenges that come with an old building. So on to Chris, I guess.
Chris?
All right, and I'm Chris Lockhart. I'm the Director of Technology at Princeton City Schools. I've been in school IT for about 17 years, IT in general for about 25 years, and I have the privilege of having gone through 2 major Wi-Fi renovations at 2 different districts. So we'll be talking about connectivity and our experiences and some best practices as far as connectivity.
Thank you, Chris. Once again, my name is Mark Hopkins. For the last 8 years, I've been the Network Services Manager for SWOCA. I spent about 4 years at a suburban greater Cincinnati school. SWOCA is one of 18 Ohio ITCs. We serve about 140,000 students in Southwest Ohio region and representing 36 of our member districts across 8 counties. So I'm very happy to have been asked to be here today. We want to start with some bandwidth standards as we look at connectivity and we look at what does the unprecedented and uncertainty of the fall come into play. What is normal? And that's one of the things that I've studied for several years. The E-rate modernization order actually set a goal of 1 gig per 1,000 students and staff. And they set that goal several years ago, and we're forecasting that we would be at that by the 2017-2018 school year. So we started doing an annual bandwidth survey, and I want to thank my ITC partners for participating in this survey. And as such, we've been able to study about 400,000 students worth of normal bandwidth habits. And we began this because we were historically seeing, when I came to SWOCA, about a 57% long-term rate in the Southwest region. So those are the 4 or 5 ITCs in the Southwest section of Ohio. And we all had kind of consistent data. SWOCA began, somebody forgot to turn off auto advance. SWOCA began charting this in 2015, in the 2012-2013 school year. And then in 2016, we saw a transformative event, one-to-one testing, online Chromebooks, and the first year of Cat 2 funding. So we wanted to see what happened with bandwidth and what was normal. Our 2020 model, which we announced and published back in February, shows that of the roughly 400,000 students worth of normal, the average student was using about 112K per student in February or January of this past year. Now, obviously, that was before COVID, and now they're using next to nothing because nobody's in the building. A couple of the things, though, that we found that are very important is we found that how you use bandwidth and what bandwidth you're using varies a lot based on some specific questions. About 70% of the number is tied directly to your student population. But we also saw an increase if the district was a small district size or if a district had a district-sponsored one-to-one program. And when I say district-sponsored, I mean that's actually integrated into part of the curriculum. We can see a difference in that. And the other thing I want to put out here is your internet filter culture. Earlier, some folks were talking about having more open internet filters versus more closed. And we actually see that reflected in the numbers when we look at this on a district by district level. There are some other correlations that we found. The NSLP percentage, a higher percentage of free and reduced eligible students will actually increase the amount of bandwidth used per student. It varies depending on where you are. Office 365 is a significant challenge because, first of all, not a lot of schools are using Office 365, but we see at least a 20% increase in the bandwidth model and bandwidth utilization for Office 365. We also see rural and urban and the number of buildings in the district being factors, but they're a little bit difficult to model. If we look at Office 365, and one of my co-panelists, Holly, Summit Country Day is Office 365, and Holly, share with us, if you would, while I fix the slides, share with us, if you would, what you've seen with Office 365 compared to the numbers that we had already talked about.
Sure. So in our school, we had started on with Office 365 way back. I know we're an outlier, so many Google schools in the K-12 environment. But we really felt, especially for our high school students going off to college, most of the local colleges were using Office 365 and felt like that was a good model for us to use. So for us, one of the things we noticed when we started getting more and more active use of online tools, which we get into with connectivity, is that the need for a school-sponsored email address was important. Previous to that, we had kind of let kids use what they were going to use, a Gmail address, a home address, a me address, whatever. So a couple years ago, we started a pilot with our middle school and started down the path of, okay, what does a school-sponsored email look like? Why do they need it? What kind of justification do we need? Since then, we've probably had about 2 full years of students in grades 4 through 12 using Office 365 for both, online use of logging in with a school-sponsored email account, using, when it's available, single sign-on for various applications. And then additionally, in the most recent, environment of COVID, using it for Teams meetings with teachers, whether it be an individual one-on-one type of a lesson, check in with the teacher in a lower grade, or whether it was asynchronous and synchronous classes in the high school. So we've had a significant increase in utilizing the Office 365 environment. Another factor in that was, just like with Google, you want to get your on-premise stuff off-premise. So we used to all use shared drives and public drives. Now we have SharePoint and OneDrive to use for data storage. So for our students, that was a huge thing, for them to be able to access things at home, not needing to have things, to be at school to access their documents, training them to do that and how to live in that kind of world. So that was kind of some of the thrust of why we kept down the path of Office 365.
And Holly, when we ran your numbers in preparation for this, we discovered that you use quite a bit more than what the state average is of bandwidth. Can you give us a quick overview of your student population and your current bandwidth setup and what Summit Country Day is planning on doing?
Yes. So initially, through our local ISP, we have a 200 meg dedicated connection. And we quickly found that as we were moving into more and more online sources, we've had a couple outages, whether they were through our provider or through, some sort of attack. The security folks were talking about phishing and malware and, of course, DDoS attacks. That considerably ups your risk. But what we found is that when we had an outage, we kind of came to a screeching halt because so much of what we had been doing on premise is now internet connected. So that 200 meg bandwidth, as we started in the shutdown phase, we went to remote. I wasn't really concerned about what we had on campus here because nobody was on campus. But as we started analyzing what we would need to bring, our student population back online, and then, in the new environment, we are planning to open our doors with the full population in August. But what does that look like for students? We have a pretty robust exchange program with Chinese students who may or may not be able to get to the United States for the opening of school. So we know we have several students that will be learning remotely, putting cameras in classrooms, having additional Zoom and Teams, whether it's synchronous learning, so that teachers can work with students in the classroom, even if they were remote. And of course, we don't really know what this landscape looks like, but all of those considerations were things that we needed to address our connectivity. Once we started looking at everything, we realized that very quickly, if we had all of our classrooms running a Zoom or Teams meeting, we were going to quickly be consuming about a 300 meg additional bandwidth to what we had in our 200 meg bandwidth. So very quickly we were at a 500 meg bandwidth, and with the outages that we'd experienced in the recent past, we also did, I had been thinking about getting a redundant connection for, a failover purposes. But what we realized is that we really needed a load balancing secondary internet connection by a secondary provider, so that if we had some sort of provider outage, we would still be able to operate. So this was a very important kind of eye-opening time for our school to be able to kind of look at things and assess what type of bandwidth we have been using and how close we were looking at actually capping our 200 meg even before all of these types of considerations went into effect. So
awesome. Thank you, Holly. Chris, same question, bandwidth at Princeton, and what have been your experiences with connectivity under what we'll call the old normal?
Yeah, so under the old normal, it kind of goes back to the philosophy also of the network and how that impacts bandwidth. So we are a Google district. So, we have just that normal Google traffic, but we also have some philosophies as far as our filtering is concerned. So we spend a lot of time talking about whether or not to block streaming or not block streaming of both audio and video. And so what we have is we have some controls in place where the teachers are allowed to stream and they're allowed to either authorize videos on YouTube and or request particular streams for students. So because we allow that, that has increased our bandwidth needs as well as just the number of students that we have spread out across the different buildings. So one of the first things that I did when I got there was to focus on what I call the pipes and drains and make sure that we had the internal connectivity to send data and files around. And of course, that was 6 years ago, which is, half-life of technology. So everything was still server based at that time. And just a few years later, so many of our services have now gone out to web-based services that even since then, our needs have multiplied as far as bandwidth. And we work with the ITC, so we have a great relationship with them. And they help us to monitor some of those things and to make sure that we aren't maximizing our bandwidth coming out of the building. And I think we've upgraded twice since then. First, we doubled our bandwidth because we were bumping the top end of that capacity. And then we was 5 times. Like, is that quintuplicated? I don't know. I'll make up that word. But just recently, yeah, we've had to now go from we went from 1 gig to 2 gig, and we've now recently gone from 2 gig to 10 gig just to meet the capacity and need. And it's probably going to pay off if we have to do something blended, which is going to be going into our next segment here. If we're going to have staff in buildings teaching to students outside of the building, either on a 100% basis or a partial basis, that additional bandwidth is definitely going to be needed. It was an opportunity buy to make the upgrade because of some pricing and some contract timing. But now it just looks like I'm prophetic and I just knew it was happening. But that's where we're at, that always needing more as more moves from our local district out to the cloud and out to web-based services.
And the last time we had something as transformative as what we're going through now, was back when E-rate and Chromebooks, like we said, 5 years ago. So, there was a question here in the bandwidth impact. What did the strikeout in the Google Apps mean? Basically, over the past 4 years, Google Apps is becoming less unusual. And more schools are using Google Apps, so we no longer statistically see a difference between schools that use and schools that don't use Google Apps. So that's why that was crossed out in the bandwidth impact section. So what Holly and Chris are talking about is this blended learning bandwidth. And we've done a lot of studying on what does this look like with all the common tools. Since the Management Council and the ITCs are utilizing and recommending Zoom, we looked at what does Zoom say for standard definition. And a couple of the big takeaways here are 1.5 meg up and down for 720p video. And in most cases, 720p video is plenty. If you bump that up to high definition video, that number goes up to about 1.8 meg of utilization is what Zoom is calling for. Now, we did some testing and using an actual classroom style scenario, we confirmed 1.5 meg right on target. And the really cool thing about Zoom and also WebEx is the video switching technology basically makes it independent of the number of video feeds. Teams and Skype, not so much, so it's a little bit more user sensitive. And Google Meet also is actually a little bit more user sensitive. We did some testing with 15 users. Sending a screen share took 900K, sending HD video 2.8 meg. Receiving screen share with 15 users, that doubled the bandwidth utilization, or in some cases as much as tripled it, where our testing was showing 3.4 to 5.2 meg per received. Now compare that to 115K of normal utilization. And the question that was asked earlier in the session, what does it look like if all students in the building are using Zoom as the shared screen? These numbers just are not sustainable unless you have a significant upgrade of bandwidth. What does Google Meet say? Well, ideal bandwidth for group video calls outbound is 3.2 meg, and inbound with 10 plus participants, 4.0 meg is what Google Meet is saying. We're seeing that is a little understated. When we look at Teams, Teams seems to do a little bit better with bandwidth utilization. We haven't had a lot of testing with Teams. In fact, this would have been a great opportunity for us to look at Teams bandwidth. But the HD group video calling using 1080p worth, Teams is also using that video switching technology, which should make it a little bit less sensitive to the number of users. But they're saying 1 to 2 megabits per second. Our testing is showing it's can be that close, but it's really going to depend a lot more on the quality of the video. And as Teams matures, we expect this to come down a bit. So what does this mean for our blended learning considerations? And I'm going to ask Chris and Holly to speak to this in their environments. Chris alluded to it in a bit ago. How will teaching shift? How will teaching shift the impact for online? In other words, if we're in this hybrid, and the term that was used earlier, I actually wrote it down, hybrid flex or high flex model. Great word, by the way. We know that historical bandwidth numbers are going to go out the window, but what do we expect our teaching staff to do differently in a blended environment? And therefore, the question that I have is, what does that mean for our on-campus students as well as our off-campus students? We'll start with Chris.
Yeah, and I'll try not to step on some of my presentation later where we'll talk about some of the impact, but it's just that consideration of how we now deliver content, just to sterilize it in pure technical terms, how we deliver content. Are we delivering videos? We use a lot of videos in our classes, modern classes now, to illustrate points. Are we delivering images? Charts? Are we delivering screen shares? In our traditional classroom, we'll sit with a whiteboard. So now are we delivering those? So as we look at all these different mediums of content that we want to deliver, it's going to have an impact on the other terms that we talked about, whether you're doing things asynchronous or synchronous, whether the students are participating from their end as part of that blending model, or whether they're just consuming the content. So there are just so many factors, all of which have a direct impact on that bandwidth. And so I think it's an apropos question of how do we conserve that or preserve that? Is it a matter of teaching? Kind of like the conversation earlier about the phishing, where maybe there's an education program that needs to happen to understand, that if you don't need data intensive content for your class, then consider using an alternative. But if it's the best method to deliver your message, definitely use it, because we want to make sure that the students get that rich learning. And then, of course, it then falls back on us to kind of monitor that, to know where we're at and whether or not we're hitting those caps and peaks or not in our technology positions.
Thank you, Chris. Holly?
Yeah, I would just piggyback on what Chris said, in that, some of the things that I've noticed that have changed over time is how some of what you're talking about, teachers are doing things in the classroom. I know that we had discussed a situation where teachers are streaming Spotify or Pandora for nap time for the little kids, and that's a change. Rather than putting a CD on with some nice calming music, they put on a Spotify channel and stream the music that way. So those are considerations that we hadn't really talked about. And do we allow that or do we not allow that in the classroom as appropriate use of technology, and how does that affect our overall connectivity? So I would say between that and then distance learning that is happening, and again, we have international students who may or may not be able to attend, and we are planning on delivering that content to them regardless of where they're located. So I do think it's a big consideration.
So our fundamental takeaway here really is probably, yes, we will have to conserve and preserve bandwidth. We'll have to manage it like a commodity that does not want to be managed, a lot like junior high students, now that I think about it. So how do we look at this impact? How do we look at what's going to happen with a hybrid flex approach? Each meeting is going to be more important than each student. And so we're going to have to count simultaneous meetings. Maybe that's simultaneous classrooms, the AB, how many simultaneous meetings are going to be happening in your environment. And the numbers that we're able to come up with is for Zoom and WebEx, that's about 1.5 to 1.8 meg per meeting. And this is one area where a flex model actually works, because that 1.5 meg is roughly the same amount of bandwidth that those 15 to 20 students will consume if they're in the building. So that math kind of works most of the time. Google Meet, the numbers get a little harder, but they're still possible depending on how much bandwidth headroom you have. 3 to 4 meg per meeting is our recommendation. Teams, our testing is limited to 4 to 6 remote users, and so right now we're saying Teams should be about 2 meg per meeting, but please do not quote us on this. This is based on what we know today. So we're confident that because internet consumption in your typical school is downstream, we're using 115K per student from the internet to the school. And there's plenty of upstream bandwidth as long as you're using an enterprise-grade connection, a symmetrical connection, and enterprise-grade firewalls, that we're confident that teachers will be able to stream in real time, depending on what device that is. I'm going to just mention this because I know Chris is going to talk about it in a bit, but video hammers Wi-Fi, so never trust wireless to do the job of a wire. And this is going to be a situation where if you can plug it into the wall, you need to plug it into Ethernet. I think I just stole one of Chris's slides. All of the video tools will scale back to available bandwidth. So if bandwidth congestion becomes an issue, they will scale back. So your teachers might need to be prepared to turn off video or have their remote students turn off video just so they can conserve the bandwidth for content sharing and for audio. And finally, YouTube Live is always an option. I have a love-hate relationship with YouTube Live, but if you can get the video out to YouTube Live, then you can let Google handle the distribution. That is also a very strong consideration, and you have the options for recording. I want to take a moment and talk about the other end of this question, and that is the home connectivity or the homework gap. So many of us have been looking at this, and finally it's getting the attention that it deserves. And we have the benefit of a tale of two districts between Chris and Holly. They're 15 miles away, but worlds apart in their economics. So your community economics will dictate what is available to you. Limited devices per household, because the devices, as we talked about earlier, are a big part of that connectivity. And also this concept of internet as a luxury. I'm going to ask Chris to talk a little bit first about the economics and what his district learned in the COVID outbreak. And then we're going to compare to what Holly's experiences are. And remember, these two schools are 15 miles apart. Chris?
Yeah, we're 15 miles apart. Princeton is a middle-sized district. We have about 3,200 students, but we also have the designation of being the most diverse district in the state of Ohio, and it covers all of the demographics from socio-economical to ethnicity. So we have students that live in, $1.5 million homes to, apartment dwellers and all of the incantations in between. So we do have a high poverty rate as far as free and reduced numbers are concerned. So one of the things that we found out was that there were some issues with connectivity as far as the affordability, first of all. So for our district, it was a matter of, can they afford internet for all and each of our students? And the answer was no. Well, some of the providers stepped to the plate and provided free internet access for persons that had students in K-12. Well, one of the other challenges we ran into is that we do have some of our school population that's undocumented. And being undocumented meant that they could not qualify for the free or reduced internet because they didn't have the required items in order to sign up for the service, to include social security numbers and or credit cards, which is one of the two things that some of them require. So we have to deal with, some of those things. And if we want to do a synchronous classroom where we tell everybody to log in at 10 o'clock, if we're doing blended or if we're at home in the fall, there's that challenge of how do you get all of those students online? Now, as far as devices, we are going one-to-one this fall. We have enough devices in the school right now to distribute them. So devices, we can handle that. It's that last mile connectivity. And so that's the challenge with a Princeton City Schools, is just making sure that our students have that connectivity at home.
Holly?
Yeah, and I think our situation can be similar, but it's also worlds apart. We have almost a 0 free and reduced percentage in our school, and that does have its own challenges. One of the things that we see is the differences in devices. We are not a one-to-one school. We do have laptop carts and labs, and that inequity of devices just when a kid brings their own device sometimes poses its own challenge. As far as things in the home, most of our students are able to have some sort of connection, but we still, through the remote period, we did have some challenges with a few students. Some of them are using a parent's cell phone hotspot as internet connection. And what happens when that parent has to leave and go to the grocery store or leave and go to work? So I think that, having that understanding the end and that last smile, as Chris mentions, is very important in this discussion of connectivity. Because even in our more wealthier district and, our population, we still have those same challenges. And I think that those are the kinds of things that we want to make sure that we address with families, whether they're coming in and have the devices or don't have the devices. We have about 1,000 students, and because we aren't one-to-one, when we did go to remote learning this spring, we were able to basically hand anybody who needed a computer. Now on the tech side, we had to reconfigure those computers, strip some of the group policies that we had on them so that the kids could actually log in at home and have the software on there that they needed if there was some specialized software. But in general, we had a pretty successful remote, and we only had about 35 devices that we actually deployed. So out of, a middle and high school population of about 800-ish, that I thought that was a pretty good, distribution. And again, we're prepared to bump that number up with the devices that we have. But certainly it poses a different scenario than what Chris is facing on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Holly. Looking at what is currently available, many of you have seen this from me before, but the current best data is available from Connected Nation, and it still shows a large section of our state that doesn't have what Connected Nation considers broadband. That's 10 meg download and 1 meg upload. And as we've just discovered, that's not enough to even participate in a video call. As we step the requirements up to, say, 25 meg, we see, and then in 25 meg and 50 meg and even at 100 meg, which I would consider reasonable broadband to do this, we see a very large portion of our state just doesn't even have that basic connectivity. So aside from the economic issues, we have the regional issues as well. It's like there's just simply not bandwidth available. Now, both Princeton and Summit Country Day are here in the southwest corner of the state where 100 meg is normal. And I have to remind myself, sitting here in Greater Cincinnati, that I have a 400 meg connection and I've never needed more, and I actually have more available. So what can we do both on the economic side and on the connectivity side to improve this situation. Well, some of the things that came out early on in the outbreak were the Lifeline programs, Charter Spectrum and Cox for some sections of the state, and even some of the telcos have Lifeline programs, which are consumer paid internet services. But again, we go back to this concept of internet as a luxury. We know that there are services out there, but in many cases, if that family did not or had internet or had cable TV or had phone and did not pay their bill, they're not eligible for these services. So we still have that technological divide. Some of the cable and telcos are coming up with business class programs, which could be funded actually by the school district. We're working with several providers on that across the state right now. Mobile hotspots, and I'm mentioning these because I know of districts who are using them. T-Mobile, Verizon, Sprint, and Kijit. They all have hotspot solutions and various coverage, but they're able to deliver 20 meg or so in many of the areas where our fixed wireless connections just cannot. Finally, statewide, there's 4 major fixed wireless internet providers, and the ITCs are talking with them to see what can be done to extend the range of a school district's internet by utilizing something like a fixed wireless solution. Couple of the things that we're looking at, geosynchronous orbit. It's very expensive and doesn't have a lot of bandwidth, but you might have heard of things like Starlink. That is low Earth orbit satellite internet, which has a promise of about an $80 a month connection, is what some of the experts are saying, and sub 100 millisecond latency, which means this would be enough bandwidth and enough broad coverage to be able to solve this issue statewide, but still not very inexpensive, and it requires a fixed antenna being placed outside of a building, which may or may not be possible. Beta testing for Starlink is expected to start sometime this fall, so not soon enough for us to watch this, but is definitely an option that we're looking at. I would recommend, if you are in an area like a social economic area, like what Chris at Princeton is seeing, reach out to your ITC or reach out to your cable or local telephone provider and see what they can offer you. And if you're in the more geographically challenged areas, frankly, T-Mobile has the best price versus performance that I have seen. But Kijit is a really good, well-baked, easy to manage solution. So you can run the spectrum from inexpensive to expensive if you're in a position where you're able to fund hotspots. Quick note on E-rate. We are still waiting for the FCC to take some action on the proposals for funding of hotspots. And also, I'm kind of expecting USAC to do something about everybody who wants to do an internet upgrade as a reaction to this situation. Under current program rules, you are not eligible to increase your bandwidth until next July for support. You can still increase your bandwidth, but you're going to be paying that difference for this current calendar year. And then depending on your contract with your provider, whether or not that contract was worded in such a way where you can increase the bandwidth. Check with your provider and just say, hey, what are my options? The other thing I can tell you is if you are a fiber connected school and you're using an enterprise class internet connection like your ITC, it can take 45 to 90 days to execute an upgrade if new fiber optics have to be placed. And this fall, I'm expecting that number to increase because everybody who's looking to do the same thing. And with that, I think we're done with my section. Are there any questions that popped up before we turn it over to Chris?
There's one about laptop carts, but we'll cover that at the end, and Holly's actually going to go next.
Oh, my apologies. Go right ahead, Miss Holly.
Mark, are you still controlling the slides?
Yeah, I can try to give you control, but it's really just, I can follow along. I can pay attention.
Yeah, that's okay.
Whatever you want.
I'd prefer it if you controlled.
All right, then. Let's buckle up, everybody.
You're doing such a fine job. So we briefly are talking about technology. And Mark, I don't see the presentation. I don't know if you're still sharing your screen.
I must have hit the wrong button. There we go.
Excellent. So you can advance through my little animations here, but basically with technology limitations and connectivity, you know, there's three basic things to address. What do we need to know? What do we need to address? And what do we need to do? So on each of these items, Mark, next slide. What do we need to know? On-campus learning versus remote. What are the differences? How do you give your teachers effective tools to be able to make the switch? I think everybody was thrust into this on emergency mode in the spring, and we kind of all scrambled and did what we could, and we gave kudos to the teachers for pulling their hair out and doing whatever they could. But it is not just a simple thing to flip the switch and go remote. Everybody has learned that, you know, loud and clear through this. So that is definitely something, you know, we need to consider. What are the devices being used at home versus school? We had a lot of issues where, you know, when we offered to loan computers to folks, they're like, no, I have one at home. And then it turns out mom and dad are working from home, and the mom and dad laptop that the kid usually uses for homework is not available to the student because mom and dad are working from home. So, you know, like I said, we are a Office 365 Windows environment. We have a lot of people with Macs and Chromebooks at home. You know, do those devices work with our tools that our teachers are asking the kids to use? And then, you know, from there, what type, we've discussed what type of home internet is available. Is it mom's cell phone that she leaves when she goes to work, or she goes out to the grocery store and suddenly that student can't connect synchronously? What does the school's internet and infrastructure look like? You know, how old is your infrastructure? You know, Chris talked about going through 2 wireless upgrades. You know, have you done any testing? When we first went remote, I was like, well, I really don't have to do anything at this moment because nobody's coming into our building for data or for things. Most of our stuff is already provided via, you know, internet sources. And then how do we determine whether we need a redundant connection? And as I said, my initial thought was to have a backup connection, but, you know, quickly in doing some very quick assessments, it really felt like we needed to be redundant, not have some sort of failover situation. And then when does your bandwidth need to be evaluated? You know, I think obviously at a time like this, everybody did an emergency evaluation, but clearly in your planning, this should be part of your planning. You know, what is the logical cycle? Are you going with some new providers? Do you have mandatory state testing? Is there some sort of, you know, thing that comes up where you need to have that extra bandwidth? So make sure that, you know, you work with your ITCs and your partners to get that information to help you. Knowing what we know now, what do we need to address? The economic barriers we discussed, you know, the haves and the have-nots, and, you know, what is the bandwidth off campus and how do we solve those problems? Is it, in our case, we even had some teachers with issues, you know, because not only are they teaching from their homes now, they've got 2 or 3 kids at home that are also trying to have lessons and that going on from home. How many others are using the internet at home? That was a big one for us. You know, it wasn't just the one student doing one thing, but mom and dad are having Zoom calls, you know, and then the students are trying to be on some synchronous session with their classroom. To the basic thing of how is homework assigned? How do they use the devices that they have at home? Are they just using an iPad? You know, we had some kids who came back, said, I'm using an iPad, but now they needed a laptop because the laptop is, you know, more functional for what they need to do. So when we alter the homework assignment, how much of that is training the teacher and how much of that is training students? normally, you know, the teacher would be passing out a piece of paper. How do they pass out that piece of paper remotely? You know, just doing some really basic things like that. I think one of the things that we determined early on is we needed to get at the core of what our curriculum was. What is the core that needs to be addressed? Should less work be assigned, because we do not want kids on 24/7 trying to do everything remotely when we need to have them be, you know, safe and sound and understanding the stress that this environment puts on everybody. So, you know, is the less work an option? And then just the basics, you know, is this a place where we provide more innovation? You know, this gives the teachers the opportunity to maybe dip their toe into some things that they didn't plan on dipping it into before. I know that many of my teachers, especially the teachers of younger children, had to come up with remote solutions for things that, you know, they did not have to previously. You know, when you're looking at a high school, it's a different environment than when you're looking at a preschool. So just having, you know, a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting where a parent and their child could look at the teacher and just have a few words was just very reassuring to those younger kids who maybe don't understand what's going on. So, you know, and then are there programs to address the inequities that we discussed? You know, are there, you know, the public libraries obviously are a wonderful resource for internet connection, for sources of books and information, vendor partnerships, community outreach programs, community, you know, programs from wherever you are that will help with these kinds of things. So those are kind of the big things about needing to address. And then getting on to, from there, what do we need to do? What are the solutions? The basics are, I think, you know, partnering with your vendors, partnering with your colleagues, your service providers, like your ITCs, your ISPs. These people are the keys to making your world a lot easier. I think we all, if you've been in this for any length of time, have made a lot of friends in this industry to really help you through the difficult times and to get advice to what works for you. One of the things, as was stated earlier, is that, you know, these vendors come out of the woodwork on, you know, what are they, you know, here's this free software to help you out. Well, that, in our case, you know, a lot of these things are Google partnerships. You know, well, that's not going to work in our environment. So you really have to know your environment. Your teachers have to be understanding that they just can't call up their teacher friend in the next school district and understand that that's going to be applicable to their environment. So the implementations of standards, you know, one of the things we talked about was, it was kind of, you know, everybody was the free-for-all. Now we're looking at, okay, what is the core toolbox that a teacher needs to have? What is the core toolbox that a student needs to have to be able to, you know, utilize those tools effectively? The next thing would be the implementation of assistance programs. Clearly, even though we have a very low free and reduced, that doesn't mean we don't have needs. So when is that need identified? Is that identified during the admission process into our school, or do we do some sort of evaluation with surveying parents and students based on this most recent situation has really helped us with that, to be able to determine what are the needs and how would we solve those things. Knowing, you know, the limitations and planning for the future, addressing the unknown. It's clearly hard to plan when we don't know what's going to happen. This is the prime, you know, this time has been a prime example of that. And then finally, education, education, education. Educate the students, educate your faculty, educate your administration. Having everyone educated as to what is needed, what is right for your school and your environment. And then even in the simple things that Mark was discussing about the standard definition video versus high definition video. You know, a normal faculty member is going to hear blah, 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 but that is core. And if we have the standard and say, you know, an implementation of a standard that says you will broadcast your video in standard definition, not high definition, then as a district person, you can help control that connectivity and control the end user experience. Because bottom line, what we want is an effective end user experience for both our faculty and our students.
All right. And Mark, if you could continue to flip the slides, that would be great. So I'm going to talk about impact on technology adoption, and we're going to talk about it from the connectivity perspective. Next slide. And the impact that it has on technology adoption. So again, we've kind of covered this, that, a lot of us are looking at one-to-one take-home policies now, whereas for Princeton previously we did not. So, Justin, I see, has a question in the Q&A about how do we clean the devices that kids are sharing. So one of the things is this is going to have a huge impact on technology adoption. A lot of us are looking for more Chromebooks or more devices, and that's apparent by the fact that everything is sold out until midwinter at this point. So we're going to have that. So ideally, we'll have to move from that more shared devices to more individual. Otherwise, you're just going to have to clean between each use and find a way to do that at the classroom level. But, we've also talked about the fact that there are some gaps in connectivity. So there's a lot of conversations about schools providing internet access to students. Mark had talked about some of the cellular options. A lot of us scrambled and did some parking lot access options. There were some drawbacks to that, and just for the sake of time, I won't go into the full details, but the problem with the parking lot access was students had to be able to get to the parking lot to access their internet connectivity. SneakerNet, we had some innovative schools that did thumb drives as a means of moving data back and forth from the school. And then one of the things that Princeton has done, we're not unique, others have done it, is bus Wi-Fi access. So we have a mobile book center that we actually move throughout the community, even during the summer, where we provide internet access to the students. So if for some reason they're not covered by one of the other options, they have a schedule where they can come out to the parking lot of their apartment complex and they can upload and download their assignments as necessary. Also, there's some community places, libraries, fast food restaurants, and public hotspots. So as a district, you can connect and communicate with those entities and establish a relationship so that when the students come in, it's understood that they're going to be there to use the internet access. And if you have a really good relationship, you can even get agreements where some of the fast food restaurants or coffee shops, if the student identifies themselves as a student, won't require a purchase for that use. But again, that's going to require you as at the district level to go out and talk to these entities and form that bond of connectivity to allow the students to be able to get access in their local communities without having to come to the school to get that connectivity if we're still out of school come fall. Next slide, please, Mark. And in politics, they say never waste a good crisis. And so I think we should be looking at that also. The SAMR model is a great model to look at while we're having to innovate right now and do new things and new technology adoption. We should be moving our way down this particular visualization of the SAMR, where we start with substitution, where, substitution, what that looks like is if you're reading a book, now that book is available online, okay? To augmentation, where now we add a little bit more to the book. So now the book is online, but maybe it has visual cues, little movie segments and such. So we're augmenting it. Modification is where you say, we're going to change this up a little bit. So, now we don't want you to just watch and listen. We want you to participate. So now, there's more interactivity all the way to redefinition. So maybe when we get to redefinition and we're studying Shakespeare, we have the kids turn on their webcam and give a brief performance of what they've read and then explain what that means to them. So now we're changing that dynamic, and we're just completely transforming the way that we use it, because technology will allow us to do things that we couldn't do before. So again, as we're looking at having to change this adoption, let's not stay where we are. Let's go ahead and move down that SAMR model to make a better overall environment. And then we can bring that into our classrooms. And it's also going to push our teachers a little bit, which I think at some point, we're forced to do, because if we're not teaching in front of the class, they're being forced to learn something new anyway. So let's not waste that time. Let's go ahead and get them moving forward also. Next slide, Mark. One of the things we talked about, revisiting classroom technology. So Mark alluded to this earlier. I am a proponent of, if you have to plug an AC cord into it, go ahead and run an Ethernet cable to it also. So as we're, designing rooms, thinking about rooms, if we can start to now think about how we integrate that technology, there's going to be some big changes that may need to be made short term, and some of them I've covered it already during the day, so I won't go back and go over it again. But from cameras in classrooms to microphones in classrooms, some of those things, as you implement these things, I know that the wireless is ubiquitous if you've done it right, but if you're going to have to plug an AC cable into it, go ahead and put an Ethernet cable, so that way when the students do come back and we are now doing these SAMR models, the teachers' devices, the classroom devices are not competing with that bandwidth with the student devices, who likely will not be wired because they're running around with them. There's some type of mobile device. Next slide, Mark. All right. And we're also using a whole lot of online resources. So one of the impacts on the technology adoption is going to be building in some vetting mechanisms for this. Now, again, it's kind of a connectivity, but it's kind of a procedural also, because we've got a lot of very innovative teachers, and we love them. We love the ideas that they come up with, the new way to use tools. But there has to be some type of vetting process where they can get started with it. But if it's going to be adopted, it has to go through a vetting process to make sure that it's FERPA certified, that privacy and data is being used properly, and somebody should be the police or the legal agreement person that kind of reads through all of that and makes sure that it's proper for the students and that data isn't leaking out. And again, there's no FERPA issues to deal with. And we are going to kind of skip the next slide, Mark, because we've already talked about, so you just go ahead 2 slides, please. We've already talked about the different devices, and that's been covered. So again, just kind of the last things that, we're still at some point dealing with the unknown. And necessity is the mother of both invention and innovation. So I feel like we're in a really exciting time where we get to help redefine what K-12 education looks like. And since it is going towards technology, we have a seat at the table and have a voice. And so it's a chance for us to help our staff, help our students, help our administration move in a direction that's going to make, first of all, our job easier, but second of all, allow for those technology innovations to become part of what the new K-12 will look like. And we've got about 5 minutes left, and we've got our Q&A. So I do see that we have, looks like Justin. I think I may have answered that question for Justin. Justin was saying, with multiple kids using computers in the carts, there are a lot of cleaning. What are you guys doing? So since we're live right now, I'll jump in. Justin had previously asked, how do you go about cleaning the carts? So my response was, for the carts themselves, they could be cleaned with common disinfectants, if that was the question. If the question is about the devices, you're going to have to do a little bit of testing to make sure that your plastic and your screens are safe with whatever you're using. 50% alcohol and water is a good start, but make sure you test it on your plastics that it doesn't strip out some of the plastic things. But I'm sure there's a lot of resources online for that as far as the cleaning.
One addition to that, Chris, real quick, is if you have any soft component like a wrist rest on the keyboard, We have heard that a lot of the common disinfectants, which are approved for plastics, will actually disintegrate those, and you'll end up with a gummy mess. So testing. There is a website for the EPA that does list approved chemicals for certain viruses, and they do actually have a coronavirus section, which will tell you what type of materials there are. And in fact, they recommend against the Lysol wipes in a lot of cases simply because of the mechanical nature of keyboards and things like that. So the EPA has some guidance on that.
All right, and let's see here. We've got, and I'm sorry, I'm going these in reverse order now. Did you say that Chromebooks are not available in the state until winter? It depends on what model you're looking for. I know some of them are immediately available. I think I got a proposal for Acers that were immediately available. We were looking for Lenovo's in particular, and the model we're looking for, they're saying November, December. That was from Anonymous. Beth K, who position is typically the resource vetting king or queen? Thank you for being inclusive. And curriculum or tech department or both. So I saw Holly just rolled away for a second, but I'll have her jump in here and say, who approves Holly apps or vets them at your location?
For us, it's our tech department. We have a curriculum person, but she focuses on the tech, on the curriculum core, and then one of my coworkers is really the person that works with the curriculum coordinator to kind of make sure that the tools are applicable to our environment, that they're what we want. She does an extensive, exhaustive researching of the tools and trying to pare them down, because just like with anything online, you usually can find 5 to 10 tools that do the exact same thing. I mean, just look at screencasting. That's one that we struggle with all the time. Do you use X or do you use Y or do you use 14 other different products that are out there? So for us, it has been the tech person, but she also works very closely with the curriculum person as well to make sure that the tech that's being used is directly in line with the curriculum goals that we have.
Very good.
As well as being compliant with any, FERPA, SIPA,
Exactly.
and COPA is a really big one, especially with these tech tools. So the other thing that I'm going to throw in there is make sure that whoever's making those decisions has actually been delegated the authority to make those decisions on behalf of the district. There have been cases where a teacher has actually said, oh, I'm going to go ahead and use this without the authority, but there was no clear designation that the teacher did or did not have that authority, and it created, let's just say, a more challenging situation than it could have or should have been.
Very good. Looks like the last question here is about cleaning devices again. And again, we've saved probably the most complicated question for last. So Chris H says, how can devices on carts and in labs be cleaned between classes? Who is doing the cleaning? Is anyone having students assist with the cleaning of the devices? And are there any legal hurdles to that type of cleaning plan or age limits? Thanks in advance. So with that, we'll be back in the fall with answers for all. That's a huge question, Chris. And I think it's going to be on the scope of this. We'll see if Mark can find that link to add to the chat and or the Q&A to make sure that that's available for the federal program that covers that. But yeah, it's going to be a challenge asking students to do anything with cleaning products, first of all. Second of all, putting on my fake lawyer hat, the liability of making this one student responsible for the health and welfare of another student by properly cleaning. So it's just something I don't think we're going to be able to answer within the confines of this type of forum. But we do have some statewide chats that go on a weekly basis through some other forums. If you're on the TLO site or the statewide listserv, those are advertised there. So I won't go through the challenge of trying to lay them all out here, but make sure that you're on that statewide list and you'll see some of those available, and they're constantly talking about some of those issues.
I would just also like to add that probably one of the best things for everybody to remember is that if the kids themselves are hand washing and sanitizing, you know, I know that in our lower elementary school, you know, as the kids lined up to walk into the computer lab, the teacher was standing there with the sanitizer. So before they even touched a keyboard, their hands were sanitized. That's not going to get 100%, but certainly that helps in the process. And I think what we're all experiencing here is that we need a multi-layered approach to cleaning and cleanliness and transmission. So I would just add that the more you can have them clean before they ever touch anything, the less there is actually on the device itself.
Boy, does that really speak to a need for a one-to-one program? Never did we thought disinfecting would be a benefit for having to go one-to-one. Any final questions before we throw it back to Mike? All right, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you all for attending. You get my little slideshow up here. I want to thank everybody who participated today. I apologize for all the inconveniences and having to relog on, but sometimes things don't work out the way you want them to. I especially like to thank Rachel Granatier. She was our participant yesterday when we were doing some testing. If you have any questions, please contact me. Here's my email address, my phone number. And just wanted to say, you know, hopefully this went well, as good as it can be expected. We might be doing this again in the fall, depending on circumstances for the fall technology coordinators meeting. Hopefully we can get the last kinks worked out of it with the presenters logging in. So I hope you all have a good summer, what's left of it. And if you have any questions, concerns, please let me know. Presenters, if you have not sent me your presentation so I can share those out here shortly, please do so. And with that, are there any further questions for me or for the group? Let me see here. Dave, do you see anything?
There was one last question that came up about access points.
Okay. What access points are you all using? Are you all using? That speaks to my heart, y'all. It's a Southern Ohio boy. Y'all. That's spelled wrong, but that'll do. Okay. Multiple moderators are replying to this. So.
Yeah, I know it was asked earlier in the Q&A. There were some responses. I think Meraki was one, Arrowhive, Ubiquity. So if they get the Q&A text, there were some answers in there for access points.
Yeah, we use Cisco, but that was not my choice. It's because our outside IT consultant is Cisco certified up the wazoo, and there's political reasons why we do that. Personally, I would use something else that doesn't have a name on it that costs so much money. Not that they make a bad product, but you pay for it.
Any other responses?
I just posted there. We have a very large Cisco implementation that we manage for our members. We have a few that we manage that are Ubiquity, but I would say Cisco, Ubiquity, Meraki, Arrowhive, and Aruba is actually quite popular in our area as well. We have several that are running Extreme as well.
Ruckus.
Let's just say varying levels of comfort with those.
We took a chance on Mist. I know probably some of you were like, what is Mist? Because it's not at all commonplace in education, but we had the vendor contact us and they were interested in breaking into the education market. So we gave them a chance and have loved them. They've been great.
All right. Well, with that, once again, thanks for participating. Hopefully, I think from what we saw at the end of the first session, that you can go and watch the video or recording of the video. So if you missed anything, would like to review it, please do so. Once again, I want to thank Dave and all the other presenters. Dave's been a big help to me during this process. With that, we're going to end the session, and hope you have a good rest of the day. I know it's pretty hot here where I'm at in Lancaster, so.
Same here.
Yeah, it's gonna be ugly the rest of the year, rest of the summer. All righty.
Take care.
Thank you all.